Chapter 1. The Threshold of the Secret Stairs. Imagine, if you will, a hallway that seems to stretch just a little longer than the house should allow, a corridor where the air grows cooler and the light begins to take on a soft, amber quality, like honey poured over a wooden floor. At the very end of this hallway, tucked away behind a door that is slightly narrower than the rest, lies the beginning of your journey upward. This door is made of solid oak, its grain undulating like the waves of a slow, dark river, and when you reach out to touch the handle, the brass is cool, so very cool against the warmth of your palm you feel the weight of 100 years resisting you, just for a heartbeat, before the hinges give way with a long, low groan that sounds like a sigh from a sleeping giant. Beyond the door, the air changes. It is no longer the air of the kitchen, with its smells of burnt toast and soap, nor is it the air of the garden, thick with the scent of damp earth and cut grass. No, this air is different. It is still. It is dry. It smells of ancient cedar wood, of linseed oil, and of a strange, sweet dryness that can only be described as the scent of time itself. You step onto the first stair, and the wood beneath your feet feels solid, yet it acknowledges your presence with a subtle, familiar complaint. The stairs are steep, winding upward in a gentle spiral that mimics the curve of a nautilus shell. Your hand finds the banister, a smooth, polished rail of mahogany that has been touched by 1,000 hands before yours, and as you slide your fingers along its surface, you can feel the microscopic ridges of the wood grain, the places where the varnish is worn thin, and the occasional indentation where a child's toy might have struck it decades ago. The darkness here is not frightening, it is a soft, velvet darkness, a charcoal cloak that wraps around your shoulders as you ascend, step by step, further and further away from the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall below. With every step, the sounds of the world below begin to dissolve. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds in the eaves, the muffled sound of a car passing on the street outside, all of it begins to thin out, like a mist being burned away by the morning sun. You are entering a realm of silence, but it is a textured silence, a silence filled with the weight of things unsaid and memories unremembered. You look up, and there, at the top of the stairs, a sliver of light begins to bleed through the floorboards of the attic. It is a sharp, brilliant white light that cuts through the dimness like a blade of silver, and as you draw closer, you can see the millions of tiny dust motes dancing within it. These motes do not fall, they float, suspended in the heavy air, rising and falling with the rhythm of your own breath. They are like tiny stars in a wooden galaxy, spinning slowly, drifting on invisible currents. You reach out a finger to touch one, but it darts away, caught in the wake of your movement. The stairs continue, one by one, and you find yourself counting them in your mind. 7, 8, 9, until the wood beneath your feet changes from the narrow planks of the staircase to the wide, expansive boards of the attic floor. You have arrived at the threshold. The air here is warmer now, heated by the sun that has been beating down on the slate roof all through the long, humid afternoon. The ceiling is slanted, following the pitch of the roof, and the rafters are exposed, great, dark beams of timber that look like the ribs of a great, wooden whale. You stand perfectly still, letting your eyes adjust to the brilliance of the light and the depth of the shadows. There is a sense of immense pressure here, not a heavy pressure, but a fullness, as if the room is packed to the brim with the invisible presence of the past. You take your first full step into the room, and the floorboards beneath you let out a long, melodic creak that seems to travel all the way across the attic, echoing off the trunks and the boxes and the old furniture until it fades into the corners. The light pools on the floor in great, golden rectangles, illuminating the layers of dust that have settled over everything like a blanket of grey snow. It is a world of sepia and gold, of shadow and light, and as you stand there, at the very top of the world, you feel the frantic pace of your heart begin to slow, matching the slow, rhythmic pulse of the house itself. You are no longer in a hurry. There is nowhere else to be. There is only the light, the wood, and the long, beautiful afternoon that stretches out before you, forever and ever. Chapter 2. The silver motes in the shaft of light. You stand there, perfectly motionless, at the top of the stairs, your boots resting on the wide, honey-coloured planks of the attic floor. The silence here is thick, almost heavy, like a deep pool of water that has remained undisturbed for 1,000 years. But it is not a dead silence, it is a living, breathing stillness, and your eyes are drawn immediately to the centre of the room, where the roof tapers upward into a high, shadowed peak. There, through a small, circular window, or perhaps a gap where a slate tile has slipped just a fraction of an inch, a single, magnificent shaft of sunlight pierces the gloom. It descends at a sharp, diagonal angle, a solid pillar of radiance that seems to hold up the very weight of the roof. It is a column of liquid gold, a bridge of fire connecting the world of the sun to this forgotten world of shadow. And within this light, you see them. The motes. At first, they appear to be nothing more than a chaotic swarm of silver specks, but as you watch, as your breathing slows and your vision softens, you begin to see the intelligence in their movement. They are the microscopic debris of a century, the pulverized essence of old letters, the skin cells of ancestors, the fibers of silk dresses and woolen blankets, all reduced to a fine, celestial powder. They do not merely fall through the air, they float. They drift. They perform a slow, rhythmic ballet that follows the invisible currents of the room. You watch a single mote, a tiny, crystalline spark, as it rises slowly, caught in the warmth radiating from a sun-drenched floorboard. It spirals upward, spinning on an invisible axis, gleaming like a diamond against the velvet darkness of the rafters. It rises until it reaches the edge of the light, and for a moment, it hangs there, trembling on the boundary between the visible and the invisible. Then, with a graceful, lethargic tumble, it sinks back down, joining a million of its companions in a slow-motion nebula. There are millions of them, perhaps billions, and together they create a texture in the air that you can almost feel against your skin. The air in the attic is not empty, it is a dense, shimmering medium, a sea of suspended history. You feel a strange, hypnotic pull as you watch them. Your eyes follow the undulating waves of silver, the way they cluster together in dense clouds and then disperse into thin, ethereal veils. You take a slow, deep breath, and you can feel the dryness of the dust at the back of your throat, a sweet, earthy taste, like the smell of a book that hasn't been opened since the turn of the century. The sunlight warms the side of your face, a gentle, persistent heat that feels like a hand resting against your cheek. You move your hand slowly, tentatively, into the path of the light. Your skin, which looks so ordinary in the hallway below, is suddenly transformed. Every fine hair on your arm is illuminated, glowing like a strand of spun glass. The lines in your palm become deep, shadowed canyons, and the dust motes begin to settle upon you, landing so softly that you cannot feel them, a dusting of silver light upon your flesh. You watch the way the light interacts with the floorboards. Where the pillar of sun hits the wood, the grain of the oak seems to ignite. The deep browns and burnt oranges of the timber vibrate with a subterranean energy. You can see the microscopic textures of the wood, the tiny pits, the long, flowing vessels that once carried sap through a living tree, the scars of old tools. The heat in this spot is intense, a concentrated summer afternoon trapped in a few square inches of space. You can smell the resin in the wood beginning to weep, a sharp, pine-like scent that cuts through the mustiness of the attic. Around this pillar of light, the shadows are not black, but a deep, resonant indigo. They seem to pulse in time with your heartbeat. You realize that the attic is breathing with you. When you exhale, the dust motes dance away from you in a sudden, frantic swirl, whoosh. When you inhale, they are drawn back toward you, a shimmering tide of forgotten matter. It is a dialogue of motion, a silent conversation between the observer and the observed. You find yourself wondering about the journey of these tiny particles. This one, perhaps, was once part of a lace curtain that fluttered in a breeze in 1895. This one was a grain of sand brought home in the pocket of a child's coat after a trip to a sea that no longer exists. They are the ghosts of the physical world, stripped of their form and weight, left only with the ability to catch the light. They are beautiful in their insignificance. They represent the quiet, relentless accumulation of time, the way that every moment leaves a trace, even if that trace is only a speck of silver in a beam of sun. The light begins to shift, ever so slightly, as the sun moves across the sky outside. The pillar of gold tilts, moving a fraction of an inch across the floor, revealing a new section of the attic, illuminating a forgotten corner of a rug, the edge of a stack of newspapers, a rusted iron hinge. It is like a spotlight in a darkened theater, slowly moving from one actor to the next, telling a story that has no beginning and no end. You stand in the center of this theater, a witness to the slow, golden crawl of time. You feel the weight of your own life beginning to lighten. The worries of the world below, the clocks, the schedules, the endless noise, seem as distant and insubstantial as the dust itself. Here, there is only the light. There is only the suspension. There is only the infinite, rhythmic dance of the silver motes in the afternoon air. Your mind drifts, floating along with the particles. You imagine yourself becoming that small, becoming a part of the nebula, weightless and glowing, drifting through the centuries in a state of perfect, sun-drenched peace. The warmth of the attic envelops you, the scent of the wood grounds you, and the sight of the light mesmerizes you until the boundaries of your body feel soft and blurred. You are no longer a visitor, you are a part of the attic's long, slow dream. Chapter 3. The scent of cedar and forgotten time as you move deeper into the heart of the attic, stepping away from the blinding pillar of light and into the amber-hued shadows of the eaves. A new sensation begins to envelop you, rising up to meet you with the quiet persistence of an incoming tide. It is the scent of the attic, a fragrance so complex and layered that it feels less like an aroma and more like a physical presence, a thick, invisible tapestry woven from a century of stillness and preservation. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the visual world recede, and immediately the air seems to thicken with the essence of ancient wood and the slow, sweet decomposition of organic matter. The primary note, the deep, resonant bass line of this olfactory symphony, is the scent of cedar. It is a sharp, clean, and medicinal fragrance, yet it is softened by the passage of decades, losing its jagged edges and becoming something warm, resinous, and profoundly comforting. You find yourself drawn toward a large, heavy chest sitting in the corner, its surface a dark, mottled reddish-brown. This is the source of the primary perfume, a vessel carved from a tree that may have stood for centuries before it was ever turned into furniture. The cedar oil, though long dried on the surface, still lives deep within the grain of the wood, and as the heat of the midsummer sun presses down through the roof tiles, it draws that oil out in a slow, invisible evaporation. It is a scent that speaks of protection and of sanctuary. For generations, this aroma has stood as a guardian, a chemical sentinel against the intrusion of moths and the slow creep of rot, keeping the treasures within in a state of suspended animation. As you breathe it in, you can feel the molecules of the wood settling in your lungs, grounding you, pulling your consciousness deeper into the wooden bones of the house. But beneath the sharp, top note of the cedar, there are subtler, more elusive layers of history. There is the scent of old wool, heavy, dense, and slightly lanolin-rich, suggesting the presence of thick winter coats and hand-knitted blankets that have not felt the bite of a frost in 40 years. This smell is earthy and honest, a reminder of sheep and hillsides and the labor of hands long gone. Intermingled with the wool is the ghost of dried lavender, a faint, floral vibration that has faded from a bright purple shriek to a dusty, grey whisper. The lavender was likely tucked into the folds of the fabrics in small muslin sachets, and though the flowers have long since turned to powder, their soul remains trapped in the fibers, a sweet, melancholic reminder of a summer garden from a forgotten era. You lean closer to the rafters, where the great oak beams are exposed to the heat of the roof. Here, the smell changes again. It is the scent of sun-baked timber, a scorched, toasted aroma that smells of the forest and the hearth. It is the smell of lignin, the complex organic polymer that gives wood its strength, slowly breaking down over 100 years of seasonal expansion and contraction. Chemists call this the scent of old books, a delicate cocktail of vanilla, almond, and damp earth, and here in the attic, it is the very breath of the building. It is the smell of time itself, the slow, inevitable oxidation of life into memory. You inhale deeply, and for a moment, the scent is so overwhelming that you can almost see the forest these beams came from, the damp moss and the ringing of axes in the cold winter air of the 19th century. There is also the metallic, slightly ozonic tang of the dust itself, a mineral scent that speaks of the stone and mortar of the chimney stack that rises through the center of the room. It is a dry, flinty smell, like the air before a thunderstorm, reminding you that this attic is perched high above the earth, closer to the sky than to the soil. And occasionally, as a stray breeze finds its way through the eaves, you catch a fleeting, ghostly hint of something more personal, the faint, lingering trace of a Victorian perfume, a splash of bay rum, or the charcoal-like residue of a wood-burning stove from the floors below. These are the scents of human life, the aromatic signatures of the people who once moved through these rooms, now reduced to a few scattered molecules drifting in the rafters. The heat of the afternoon intensifies the experience, acting like a slow cooker that releases the deepest essences of the attic's contents. The smell of old leather begins to rise from a stack of discarded suitcases, a rich, animalic scent that speaks of long-distance train travel and the steam-filled air of distant stations. The leather is dry and cracked, its oils long gone, leaving behind a fragrance that is salty and austere. Beside it, the smell of aged paper from a box of old newspapers begins to bloom, a scent that is slightly acidic, like fermenting apples, mixed with the faint, oily smell of printer's ink that has long since bonded with the pulp. You stand in the center of this aromatic cloud, and you feel your mind beginning to wander, untethered from the present. Scent is the only sense that bypasses the logical centers of the brain, traveling directly to the limbic system, the ancient seat of emotion and memory. As you breathe, You are not just smelling wood and cloth, you are experiencing the emotions of the past. The feeling of safety in a nursery, the excitement of packing for a journey, the quiet sorrow of tucking away a loved one's clothing. All of these things are encoded in the air around you. The attic is a library of smells, a repository of every breath ever taken in this house. The rhythmic quality of your own breathing becomes a part of the attic cycle. Inhale, and you draw in the cedar and the sun-baked oak exhale, and you contribute your own warmth to the room. The scent is hypnotic, a heavy, golden veil that slows your thoughts until they are as lethargic as the dust motes. You feel as though you are being preserved, just like the contents of the cedar chest, held in a state of perfect, aromatic grace. The world outside, with its exhaust fumes and its synthetic fragrances, its plastic and its movement, feels like a dream from which you have finally woken. Here, in the scented silence of the attic, there is only the slow, fragrant decay of the years, a beautiful and necessary transformation that turns the mundane into the sacred. You let the scent fill you, saturating your skin and your hair, until you are certain that when you finally leave this place, you will carry the smell of 1920 with you, a secret passenger in the folds of your clothes. Chapter 4. The weaver of corners. As you move your gaze from the glowing floorboards to the deep, triangular recesses where the massive oak rafters meet the floor, you discover the silent, silver architecture of the corners. This is the domain of the weavers, the tiny, patient engineers who have spent decades constructing a city of silk and shadow in the places where the broom has never reached. These are not merely cobwebs, they are the delicate, translucent tapestries of time itself, woven with a precision that defies the chaos of the outside world. In the dim, filtered light, they appear like veils of frozen smoke, draped elegantly from one beam to another, bridging the gaps between the forgotten artifacts of the past. You step closer, your feet making no sound on the thick layer of dust, and you find yourself mesmerized by the sheer complexity of these silver nets. The geometry is staggering. Even here, in the neglected heights of the house, there is a mathematical order that persists. You see the radial lines, the strong, structural foundations of the web, anchored firmly into the rough-hewn wood of the rafters. You can see where the silk has been fused to the timber, a bond so strong that it has survived the expansion of the wood in the summer heat and its contraction in the winter frost. And then, spiraling inward with a rhythmic, hypnotic regularity, are the capture threads, coated in microscopic droplets of glue that have long since dried into tiny, crystalline beads. These webs are maps of a long-forgotten industry, the physical remains of thousands of hours of silent labor, performed in the absolute dark by creatures that measure their lives in the vibrations of a single thread. In the very center of one particularly vast and intricate web, tucked away in the deep velvet shadow of a joint, you spot the weaver itself. It is a small, dark jewel of a creature, a tiny orb of shadow with legs as delicate as the hair of a violin bow. It is perfectly still, its legs splayed out in a wide, sensitive star, resting lightly upon the radial lines. It does not move as you approach, it has the patience of the wood and the stone. It exists in a state of perpetual, meditative waiting, its entire world consisting of the subtle tremors of the air and the slow passage of the sun across the attic floor. You imagine the millions of tiny, rhythmic movements required to create this silver kingdom, the way the spider pulled the liquid silk from its own body, drawing it out into a thread so fine it is almost invisible to the human eye, then anchoring it with a touch as light as a falling leaf. When a stray beam of light happens to catch the edge of a web, the silk ignites into a spectrum of iridescent colors, shimmering with the ghosts of rainbows. You see faint pinks, oily greens, and bruised purples that flicker for a heartbeat before vanishing back into the gray. The dust motes you watched earlier, those wandering travelers of the air, eventually find their way here, to these silent outposts. They become entangled in the silk, forming a soft, furry coating over the silver threads. Over many, many years, the web ceases to be a trap and becomes a record, a physical accumulation of every particle of matter that has ever drifted through this part of the attic. It becomes a thick, felt-like veil, a heavy curtain of grey lace that sags under the weight of its own history, draped over the handle of a rusted trunk or the frame of a forgotten portrait. You lean in, your face only inches away from a strand of silk, and you can see the tiny, skeletal remains of the web's former inhabitants. There is the translucent wing of a moth, as thin as a thought, its delicate veins still visible like the lines on a map. There is the hollow shell of a fly, reduced to a dry, chitinous husk, its life force long ago absorbed into the cycles of the attic. These are the ghosts caught in the machinery of time, preserved in the silk like ancient ships trapped in a sea of grey glass. The weaver does not mourn them, it simply incorporates them into the architecture, building new layers of silk over the old, creating a dense, multi-layered history of hunger and survival that stretches back through the decades. There is a strange, paradoxical strength in these webs. You know that if you were to reach out and brush your hand through them, they would vanish in an instant, clinging to your skin like a ghostly finger, a sticky, unpleasant reminder of the hidden world. But left undisturbed, they are as permanent as the stone walls. They possess a structural integrity that mocks the fragility of the human objects they surround. You watch as a slight draft, perhaps a breath of air from a loose slate on the roof, causes the web to ripple. It moves with a slow, liquid grace, like a field of wheat in a distant breeze, or the surface of a dark pond. The movement is so subtle that you have to hold your breath to see it, a rhythmic swaying that seems to synchronize with the beating of your own heart. The corners of the attic are not empty spaces, they are filled with this quiet, silver life. As you stand there, watching the weaver in its patient vigil, you feel the boundaries of your own time-bound existence beginning to blur. You are witnessing a process that has remained unchanged for millions of years, a cycle of weaving and waiting that predates the house, the city, and the very concept of an afternoon. The weaver is the keeper of the attic's deepest silence, the one who binds the furniture to the walls and the ceiling to the floor with a million invisible knots. You find yourself breathing more shallowly now, more rhythmically, afraid that a single heavy exhale might tear the fragile geometry of this silent kingdom. There is a profound, heavy peace in this realization, that even in the most neglected, dust-choked corners of the world, there is a beauty that is being meticulously, quietly maintained. The spider, the silk, the dust, and the shadows are all parts of a single, slow-motion clock, measuring out the years in millimeters of thread and layers of grey powder. You feel a sense of gratitude for the weavers, for their persistence, for their ability to turn the debris of the air into something structured and silver. You turn away slowly, leaving the weaver to its meditation, the image of the shimmering, dust-laden silk burned into your mind like the afterimage of a star. The attic continues to breathe around you, a vast, wooden lung filled with the scent of cedar and the silver light of 1,000 childhood afternoons. Chapter 5. The old trunk with the rusted latch. As you move through the golden haze of the attic, your eyes are drawn toward a silhouette that sits apart from the rest, a heavy, rectangular shadow anchored in a corner where the floorboards seem to dip slightly under its immense, historical weight. It is a large, steamer trunk, a weathered monolith of wood and iron that has not moved for more than half a century. You approach it with a slow, deliberate reverence, your footsteps sinking into the soft, velvet carpet of dust that blankets the floor. With every inch you gain, the trunk grows in detail, emerging from the gloom like a sunken galleon rising from the floor of a dark and silent sea. The body of the trunk is wrapped in thick, darkened leather that was once a rich, vibrant chestnut but has since faded into a deep, bruised umber. The leather is mapped with 1,000 tiny cracks, a network of microscopic fissures that tell the story of countless winters where the air turned brittle and dry, and summers where the humidity swelled the wood beneath its skin. You reach out a hand, and as your fingertips make contact with the surface, you feel the cool, dry grit of the dust, followed by the surprisingly soft, paper-like texture of the aged leather. It feels like the skin of an ancient creature, a beast that has gone into a deep, hibernating sleep, waiting for a touch to wake it from its long, wooden dream. Running across the top and down the sides are heavy bands of iron, held in place by rows of blackened rivets. These bands were forged in a time when things were built to endure the rough handling of steamships and the jolting vibrations of coal-fired trains. The iron is no longer smooth, it has been claimed by the slow, relentless oxidation of the years. It is covered in a landscape of rust, a miniature terrain of copper-colored canyons and iron-red ridges that crumble slightly under the lightest pressure of your thumb. You can see where the salt air of some long-ago voyage might have first bitten into the metal, starting a process of decay that has continued in the silence of this attic for decades. In the very center of this iron-bound chest lies the latch. It is a formidable piece of Victorian engineering, a heavy, ornate mechanism of brass and steel that once shone with a brilliant, golden luster. Now, it is tarnished to a deep, dark bronze, its surface clouded by a fine patina of age. The keyhole is a small, dark void, a narrow mouth that holds the secrets of the trunk's contents behind a wall of frozen tumblers. There is no key, but the latch itself stands slightly ajar, a small, silver sliver of a gap suggesting that it was never fully closed by the last person to reach inside. You find yourself staring at that latch, mesmerized by the way the afternoon light catches the edges of the rusted rivets. You imagine the hands that last touched this metal. Perhaps they were the hands of a young woman packing away her wedding dress, her movements hurried and her heart full of the future. Or perhaps they were the steady, weary hands of a grandfather, tucking away the mementos of a life lived at sea, closing the lid on a chapter he was finally ready to leave behind. The trunk is a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the remembered, and the latch is the only thing that stands between you and the physical evidence of a forgotten life. Slowly, you place your hand beneath the heavy iron tongue of the latch. The metal is cold, a startling, deep cold that seems to have been pulled from the very core of the earth. You feel the resistance of the rust, the way the oxidation has fused the moving parts together in a gritty, stubborn embrace. You apply a gentle, steady pressure, moving upward with a slow and rhythmic force. You can feel the internal spring, long ago weakened by time, beginning to groan as it is forced to move for the first time in a generation. The sound is not loud, but in the absolute silence of the attic, it feels monumental, a dry, metallic complaint that echoes off the rafters and vibrates through the bones of the house. With a sudden, sharp snap, the latch gives way. The sound is crisp and final, like a dry twig breaking underfoot in a winter forest. The heavy iron tongue flips upward, and the tension that has held the lid closed for 50 years is finally released. A thin cloud of orange rust dust rises from the mechanism, dancing briefly in the sunlight before settling back onto the leather. You pause, letting the sound of the snap fade away, letting the silence return to its natural, heavy state. The trunk is now unlocked, yet it remains closed, the weight of the heavy oak lid still keeping the contents hidden in the dark. You place both hands on the front edge of the lid, feeling the cool curve of the wood. You take a deep, slow breath, filling your lungs with the scent of cedar and old iron. Then, with a slow and rhythmic heave, you begin to lift. The hinges, located at the back of the trunk, let out a long, low, melodic shriek, a sound that starts as a deep bass growl and rises into a thin, silver whistle as the metal surfaces rub against one another. It is a symphony of friction, a vocalization of the trunk's long stay in the darkness. As the lid rises, the air from within the trunk begins to spill out, mingling with the air of the attic. It is a different kind of air. It is cooler, heavier, and smells intensely of mothballs, dried newsprint, and the faint, sweet scent of pressed linen. It is air that was trapped in 1945 or 1952, air that has not moved, has not seen the sun, and has not been breathed by a living soul for half a century. As the lid opens wider, the golden sunlight from the attic window finally reaches into the interior, illuminating the layers of white tissue paper that cover the contents. The paper is yellowed and brittle, looking like the skin of an onion, and as the light hits it, it seems to glow from within. You hold the lid open, your muscles feeling the prodigious weight of the oak and iron. You are looking down into a well of memory, a carefully curated archive of a human life. Beneath the tissue paper, you can see the shapes of objects, the soft bulge of a fabric, the hard edge of a wooden frame, the metallic glint of a small tin box. Everything is perfectly still, perfectly preserved, held in a state of grace by the darkness and the rusted latch. You realize that by opening this trunk, you have not just moved a piece of furniture, you have restarted a clock that everyone thought had stopped forever. You have invited the sun to touch things that were meant to stay in the shadow, and as you stand there, the lid resting against the back of your arms, you feel a profound sense of peace. The trunk is open. The secret is shared. The long afternoon of the past is finally beginning to breathe again. Chapter 6. A tattered box of pressed flowers within the cavernous depths of the trunk, nestled between a heavy wool coat and the smooth edge of a wooden frame, you find a small, rectangular box made of thin, grey cardboard. It is a humble object, lacking the iron strength of the trunk or the rich aroma of the cedar rafters, yet it possesses a gravity that draws your hands toward it with an almost magnetic pull. The corners of the box have been softened by decades of gentle friction, the sharp edges of the cardboard worn down into a fine, fibrous fuzz that feels like velvet against your fingertips. The lid is slightly warped, bowing upward in the center as if the contents within are trying to breathe, trying to push back against the weight of the years. Across the top of the box, written in a delicate, looping script that has faded from a sharp black to a soft, charcoal grey, is a single word followed by a date. The graphite of the pencil has a slight, metallic sheen when the sunlight hits it at just the right angle, revealing the pressure of the hand that once guided the lead across the surface. You can see the places where the pencil was pressed firmly, and the places where it skipped over the tiny ridges of the cardboard, a silent record of a pulse and a moment from a summer that occurred a lifetime ago. You lift the box, and it is startlingly light, as if it were filled with nothing but air and the memory of light. As you slowly pull the lid away from the base, the friction of the cardboard creates a soft, rhythmic vibration that travels up your arms. Inside, you do not find jewels or gold, but something far more precious and fragile. You find a collection of ghosts. Resting on a bed of yellow tissue paper are dozens of pressed flowers, each one a tiny, parchment-like map of a garden that has long since returned to the earth. They are arranged with a meticulous, quiet care, some tucked into the folds of the paper, others lying flat and exposed, their colors transformed by the slow, chemical crawl of time. You look closely at a single rose, once a vibrant, deep crimson, now a bruised and beautiful shade of burgundy brown. Its petals are as thin as the wings of a moth, translucent and brittle, yet the intricate network of veins remains perfectly visible, a delicate circulatory system frozen in a state of eternal rest. The flower has been flattened, its three-dimensional life compressed into a two-dimensional memory, yet it still holds the shape of the sun and the curve of the wind. You can see the tiny thorns on the stem, still sharp and defiant, and the way the sepals have curled inward to protect the base of the bloom. It is a masterpiece of preservation, a testament to the human desire to catch a fleeting beauty and hold it still forever. Beside the rose lies a sprig of lavender, its tiny bells now a dusty, muted violet. Though the vibrancy has faded, the structure is intact, each individual floweret clinging to the central stalk with a stubborn persistence. When you lean in, the air around the box seems to change, carrying a faint, spicy sweetness that is both floral and earthy. It is not the smell of a living garden, but the scent of a dream of a garden, a dry, concentrated essence that speaks of long, humid afternoons and the humming of bees in the high grass. You realize that these flowers were not just picked, they were chosen. Each one was selected at the height of its beauty, carried inside with careful hands, and placed between the heavy pages of a book to begin the long, slow journey from life to artifact. You find a wild pansy, its face turned upward toward the attic's golden light. Its colors have shifted into a strange, oceanic palette of indigo and pale yellow, the edges of the petals crinkling like ancient silk. There is something profoundly moving about the stillness of these plants. They have outlasted the seasons that birthed them, they have outlasted the rain that watered them and the sun that warmed them. They have been held in the dark for so long that they have become a part of the house, a part of the attic's silent, wooden heartbeat. You imagine the person who collected them, perhaps sitting by the very window that now illuminates the floor, carefully smoothing out the petals, ensuring that not a single leaf was folded or torn. Tucked beneath the pansy is a single, large fern frond, its green hue turned to a deep, autumnal bronze. The symmetry of the leaves is hypnotic, a repeating pattern of life that looks like a fossil etched into the air. The fern feels different than the flowers, more robust, more architectural, yet it shares the same parchment-like texture. As you touch the edge of one leaf, you feel the incredible dryness of it, a dryness that has removed all weight and left only the pure form. It is a reminder that in this attic, everything is moving toward a state of elemental simplicity. The moisture of life is gone, leaving behind the structural truth of the world. As you continue to explore the contents of the box, you find tiny slips of paper tucked between the layers. They are small, hand-torn fragments with names of places and dates written in that same fading script. The South Meadow, July 1934. The Garden Wall, June 1938. Along the Creek, May 1941. These are the coordinates of a lost geography, a map of walks taken on afternoons just like this one, through fields that are perhaps now covered in asphalt or shaded by newer trees. The flowers are the only physical evidence that those afternoons ever existed. They are time capsules, holding within their brittle fibers the temperature of the air, the quality of the light, and the quiet joy of a person who stopped to notice a blossom by the path. You stay there for a long time, the grey box resting in your lap, the sunlight pooling around your feet. You feel a deep, rhythmic connection to the cycle of the years. The flowers in the box are not dead, they are simply in a different state of being. They have achieved a kind of immortality through their fragility. You realize that the attic itself is much like this box, a place where the world is pressed and preserved, where the vibrant, chaotic energy of life is slowed down and turned into something quiet, stable, and beautiful. You breathe in the scent of the dried lavender and the old paper, and you feel the frantic pulse of the modern world receding even further. There is only the box, the flowers, and the endless, golden stillness of the afternoon. When you finally begin to replace the lid, you do so with an incredible lightness of touch, making sure that the tissue paper is tucked in just so, and that the rose remains undisturbed in its bed of grey cardboard. As the lid settles back into place, the small box feels heavier than it did before, as if the weight of all those summer days has finally settled into your hands. You place it back into the trunk, nestled in the shadows, where it will continue its long, silent meditation on the nature of beauty and the passage of time. Chapter 7. The clock that stopped at 4 as you move deeper into the attic, where the ceiling slopes down to meet the floor in a sharp, intimate angle, you encounter a presence that is defined not by what it does, but by what it has ceased to do. It is a mantel clock, fashioned from a heavy, dark wood that might be walnut or perhaps a deeply stained oak, sitting atop a lopsided stack of old encyclopedias. It remains a sentinel of a forgotten era, its silhouette stark against the pale, dusty plaster of the chimney breast. This clock, once the rhythmic heart of a room below, has fallen into a profound and heavy silence, a silence that seems to radiate outward from its glass-fronted face like ripples on the surface of a black and bottomless pond. You find yourself standing before it, drawn in by the absolute stillness of its golden pendulum, which hangs perfectly vertical, frozen in the middle of a swing that was interrupted decades ago. The wood of the casing is smooth, yet when you run your fingers along the curved top, you can feel the microscopic craters of age and the fine, dry film of dust that has claimed the polish. The scent here is different from the cedar and the flowers. It is the scent of metallic fatigue and ancient, solidified oil. It is the smell of a machine that has grown tired of counting the seconds and has chosen, instead, to become a part of the eternal afternoon. The face of the clock is a pale, cream-colored enamel, now mapped with a network of fine, hair-like cracks that resemble the dry beds of ancient rivers. The Roman numerals are painted in a bold, black ink that has begun to soften at the edges, bleeding slightly into the surrounding porcelain. They stand as silent markers of a cycle that no longer moves. You look at the hands, two slender, ornate spears of blackened steel, tipped with delicate spade-like shapes. They are pointed with unwavering precision at the number 4. The hour hand rests squarely on the 4, while the minute hand reaches upward to the 12, marking the exact, infinitesimal moment when the internal life of the clock finally surrendered to the weight of time. You wonder about that particular 4 o'clock. Was it a winter afternoon, when the shadows were long and blue across the snow outside? Or was it a midsummer hour, just like this one, when the heat in the attic became so oppressive that even the mechanical pulse of the brass gears found it too difficult to continue? At 4 o'clock, the world often pauses. It is the hour of transition, the moment when the energy of the day begins to wane and the quiet approach of the evening starts to make its presence felt. By stopping at this hour, the clock has ensured that for this attic, it will always be the golden hour of tea, the quiet interval between the work of the day and the rest of the night. You lean closer, your breath fogging the small pane of glass that protects the dial. Behind the face, you can see the shadowed complexity of the movement, the brass plates, the steel pillars, and the intricate, interlocking teeth of the gears. Everything is coated in a fine, grey powder, a shroud of dust that has turned the golden brass into a dull, matte ochre. You imagine the mainspring, tucked deep within its barrel, once a tightly coiled serpent of tempered steel, full of potential energy and the desire to move. Now, it is slack, its tension dissipated into the air, its strength forgotten. The escapement, that clever little anchor that once sang the rhythmic song of the house, is locked in a permanent embrace with the teeth of the star wheel. There is a strange, hypnotic power in the silence of a clock. When it ticks, it reminds us that the present is slipping away, that every second is a leaf falling from a tree. But when it stops, the pressure of the future vanishes. In the presence of this stilled machine, you feel as though you have stepped outside of the stream of history. The attic does not care about the minutes or the hours. It only cares about the quality of the light and the slow accumulation of the dust. By failing to mark the time, the clock has become a monument to the timeless. It tells you that here, in this high and hidden sanctuary, you are allowed to simply exist, without the need to be anywhere or do anything. You reach out and touch the small, brass key that still sits in the winding arbor. It is cold, colder than the wood, and it feels heavy with the resistance of the years. You do not turn it. To win the clock would be to break the spell, to reintroduce the frantic heartbeat of the world into a space that has earned its right to be still. You prefer the clock as it is, a mechanical ghost, a frozen thought. You watch the way the sunlight reflects off the curved glass of the door, creating a brilliant, distorted twin of the attic window. Within that reflection, you see the dust motes drifting past the frozen hands, a moving clock made of light and air, far more suited to this place than one made of brass and steel. The pendulum, made of a polished brass disc at the end of a thin wooden metal rod, is the most moving part of the assembly. It was designed for motion, for the graceful, hypnotic sway that mimics the movement of a cradle or the rhythm of a deep breath. Now, it is as stationary as a mountain. You can see your own distorted reflection in its surface, a pale, elongated shape that seems to belong to another century. You feel a sense of kinship with the clock. Like you, it is a witness to the stillness. Like you, it is bathed in the amber light of a childhood that refuses to end. As you stand there, the silence of the clock seems to grow louder, a resonant, humming quiet that fills your ears and slows your own pulse. You find yourself breathing in time with the imaginary tick that isn't there, a slow, deep expansion and contraction of the lungs. The attic feels larger now, the shadows deeper, the light more precious. You realize that you have been standing here for much longer than you intended, but the clock tells you that no time has passed at all. It is still 4 o'clock. It will always be 4 o'clock. The sun will always be pooling on the floorboards, and the dust will always be dancing in the air, and the world below will always be a distant, echoing memory. You turn away from the clock, but its image remains burned into your mind. The cream-colored face, the black spears of the hands, the frozen golden disc of the pendulum. It is the anchor of the attic, the point around which all the other memories revolve. You walk slowly back toward the center of the room, your movements languid and heavy, feeling the peace of the 4 o'clock stillness settling into your very bones. The house is quiet, the roof is warm, and the history of the afternoon continues to write itself in the dust and the light, one uncounted second at a time. Chapter 8. The porcelain doll with the chipped smile beyond the silent sentinel of the clock, where the shadows of the rafters lean heavily against the far wall, sits a small, wicker nursing chair with a seat of woven cane that has partially surrendered to the years. And there, propped against the fading velvet of a discarded cushion, you discover the porcelain doll. She sits in a posture of eternal, patient expectation, her small hands resting palms down on her lap, her spine as straight as the day she was pulled from a bed of wood shavings in a toy shop long ago. You approach her with a softness in your step, for she seems to be the very heart of the attic's quietude, a small, fragile deity presiding over the kingdom of the forgotten. As you draw closer, the light from the high window finds her face, and you are struck by the incredible, luminous quality of the bisque porcelain. It is not a flat white, but a deep, milky cream that seems to absorb the sunlight and glow from within, like a piece of polished sea glass. The surface of her skin is mapped with a microscopic network of crazing, fine, hair-like lines in the glaze that have appeared over a century of expansion and contraction. They are like the faint, silver wrinkles on the face of an old friend, a delicate topography of age that only adds to her quiet dignity. You reach out, your fingers hesitating for a heartbeat before touching her cheek, and the sensation is startling. The porcelain is as cold as a river stone, a deep, crystalline chill that speaks of the inorganic nature of her beauty. It is a smooth, vitrified coldness that contrasts sharply with the warmth of your own pulse. You look into her eyes, and you find yourself falling into a deep, meditative trance. They are paperweight eyes, crafted from hand-blown glass with a depth that is dizzying to behold. The irises are a pale, watery blue, ringed with a darker indigo, and the pupils are black voids that seem to reach back into the very beginnings of the house. Because they are glass, they catch the reflection of the round attic window with a startling, diamond-like clarity. In each of her eyes, you can see a miniature version of the room, the beams, the dust, and your own dark silhouette, held there in a permanent, crystalline embrace. She does not blink, she does not look away. She simply witnesses. She has watched the sun rise and set through that window for thousands of days, her gaze unwavering as the world below grew old and the children who once held her moved away into the mist of the past. It is then that you notice the imperfection that gives her life its meaning, the tiny, jagged chip at the corner of her painted rosebud mouth. It is a small, white scar where the porcelain has been struck, perhaps by the edge of a nursery floorboard or the metal rim of a toy carriage. To some, it might be a flaw, but here, in the amber light of the afternoon, it is a mark of history. It has transformed her frozen, symmetrical beauty into a human expression, a half-smile that is both melancholic and knowing. It is as if she is sharing a secret with the silence, a quiet realization that nothing remains perfect forever, and that there is a profound peace in the breaking. You find your own mouth mimicking that slight, lopsided curve, a rhythmic sympathy passing between the living observer and the porcelain object. Her hair is a tumbling mass of mohair, once a bright, golden flax but now faded to the color of dried hay and dust. It is tangled and matted in places, yet it retains a soft, ethereal luster where the sunlight catches the individual strands. You can see the way the dust has settled deep into the curls, creating a fine, grey powder that smells of old starch and the faint, sweet scent of a linen cupboard. As you move your hand near her head, the slight displacement of air causes a few loose hairs to flutter, a ghostly movement that seems to suggest a hidden vitality. You imagine the small, vanished hands that once brushed this hair, the earnestness of a child's care, the way this doll was once the confidant for whispered dreams and secret sorrows. She is dressed in a gown of layered silk and lace that has reached a state of beautiful, organic decay. The silk, once perhaps a vibrant ivory, has darkened to the color of a bruised peach, and the fibers have become so brittle that they seem to be held together by little more than memory and the weaver's art. The lace around her collar is a masterpiece of Victorian tatting, an intricate web of knots and loops that mimics the patterns of the frost on the windowpane. As you look at the hem of her skirt, you see where the fabric has shattered, a chemical process where the old weighted silk literally splits under its own weight. It hangs in long, elegant ribbons, revealing the stiff, cotton petticoats beneath, which are still white and crisp, holding the shape of a fashion that vanished before the turn of the century. You notice her hands again, the fingers tapering to delicate, rounded tips. On her left hand, the pinky finger is missing, leaving behind a clean, white break that reveals the hollow interior of the porcelain. It is a reminder of the fragility of all things in this room. The attic is a place where gravity and time are the only masters, and even the most cherished objects must eventually pay their toll. Yet, even with her missing finger and her chipped smile, the doll possesses an incredible poise. She is not a victim of time, she is its most elegant inhabitant. She has attained a state of perfect equilibrium, where the need to be whole has been replaced by the grace of simply being. You sit on the floor beside her chair, your back against the rough-hewn timber of a crate, and for a long while, you simply exist together in the golden light. You listen to the rhythmic expansion of the roof tiles above you and the far-off, muffled sound of a bird's wing against the eaves. The doll's presence is a grounding force. She teaches you the art of the long view, the beauty of the unblinking eye. You feel the tension in your shoulders dissolve, your breathing slowing until it matches the slow, imperceptible movement of the shadows across her silk skirts. You are both part of the attic's composition now, a study in light and stillness, a moment of childhood that has been preserved in a bottle of amber air. The sunlight begins to crawl across her lap, illuminating the tiny brass buttons on her bodice, each one reflecting a small, golden spark into the dimness. You watch the way the dust motes settle on her shoulders, adding another layer to her velvet cloak of time. You realize that to her, an afternoon is an eternity, and a century is but a single, long sigh. You find a deep, resonant comfort in her company, a sense that even when we are forgotten, we are held. The doll, with her chipped smile and her glass eyes, remains a witness to the fact that love, once given, never truly leaves the objects it touched. It stays in the porcelain, it lingers in the lace, and it pulls forever in the sunlight on the attic floor. Chapter 9. A map of countries that no longer exist, leaving the porcelain doll to her silent vigil. You crawl further into the narrowing space where the roof meets the eaves, a place where the shadows are dense and smell of dry paper and forgotten ink. Here, tucked into a gap between two heavy trunks, lies a long, cylindrical object wrapped in a protective layer of oilcloth. As you pull it toward you, the oilcloth feels tacky and stiff, its surface crackling like a frozen pond as it yields to your touch. Inside is a heavy roll of thick, linen-backed paper, its edges curled into tight, stubborn spirals that have not been straightened in a human generation. This is a map, a vast and intricate cartography of a world that has since dissolved into the mist of history, a relic of a time when the borders of the earth were drawn with fountain pens and sealed with red wax. You spread the map out slowly across the floorboards, using a few heavy books to hold down the corners. The sound of the paper unrolling is a deep, textured rasp, a dry and ancient voice speaking from the depths of the 19th century. As the surface flattens, the golden light of the attic window floods across the continents, and you find yourself looking down at a planet that is both familiar and utterly alien. The oceans are a pale, faded turquoise, the color of a shallow sea over white sand, and the land masses are a riot of hand-tinted colors, pinks, ochres, and mint greens, that have softened and bled into one another over the long decades of darkness. This is a map of empires that have fallen, of kingdoms that have been renamed, and of countries that have vanished entirely from the modern atlas. You trace your finger over the region of Central Europe, where a massive, sprawling entity of pale yellow is labelled Austro-Hungary. Its borders are a complex web of black ink, encompassing mountains and plains that have since been partitioned and repartitioned a dozen times. Beneath your touch, the paper feels incredibly substantial, the linen backing giving it a textile-like weight and a rough, organic grain. You can feel the slight indentations where the engraver's plate pressed into the pulp, creating a physical relief of the world's topography. Further east, a vast, salmon-colored expanse stretches toward the horizon, labeled simply as the Russian Empire. There are no lines for the republics we know today, there is only the immense, unbroken reach of the Tsar's domain, dotted with cities whose names sound like music from a lost opera: St. Petersburg, Nigsburg, Constantinople. The ink is dark and authoritative, yet in the corners of the map, it has begun to flake away, turning the grand architecture of empires into a fine, black dust that stains your fingertips. You are touching the geography of a dream, a snapshot of a political reality that believed itself to be eternal, only to be swept away by the winds of the 20th century. Your eyes drift toward the African continent, a kaleidoscope of colonial colors where the borders are drawn with the chilling straightness of a ruler, ignoring the rivers, the mountains, and the people who live there. Here, you see names that have been erased from the contemporary mind: Abyssinia, the Belgian Congo, French West Africa. The map is a record of a specific kind of certainty, a vision of the world as seen from a library in London or a study in Paris. It is filled with terra incognita in the deepest interior of the jungles, white spaces where the cartographer's imagination was forced to stop. These blank spots are the most haunting parts of the map. They represent the mystery that still existed when this paper was printed, the places where the world was still wild and uncatalogued. You lean in closer, and you notice the small, decorative details that adorn the margins. In the corners of the oceans, there are tiny, hand-drawn illustrations of steamships with tall, thin funnels, trailing plumes of black smoke across the turquoise waves. There are depictions of sea monsters with coiled tails and terrifying manes, a lingering nod to the superstitions of an even earlier age. The compass rose is a masterpiece of calligraphy, a star of gold and black that points toward a North Pole that was, at the time of this map's creation, still an undiscovered wasteland of ice. The precision of the drawing is hypnotic, the way each coastline is shaded with thousands of tiny, rhythmic lines to indicate the depth of the water, the way the mountain ranges are rendered as delicate, caterpillar-like ridges. There is a profound, meditative sadness in looking at this map. It is a reminder that the world is a living, shifting thing, and that the lines we draw upon it are as temporary as the dust in the air. The people who first studied this map, perhaps a group of schoolboys or a traveler planning a voyage, saw these borders as solid and unshakable. They lived their lives, fought their wars, and dreamed their dreams within the framework of these colors. Now, the colors have faded, the ink has cracked, and the world they knew has been overwritten by the relentless movement of time. The map is no longer a tool for navigation, it is a poem about the transience of power and the endurance of the earth itself. The scent of the map rises up to meet you, a sharp, acidic smell of old wood pulp mixed with the faint, metallic tang of the lithographic ink. It is the smell of a Victorian classroom, of leather-bound books and heavy globes. As you run your hand across the surface, you find a small, dark stain in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, perhaps a drop of coffee or a smudge of ink from a long-dead hand. It is a human mark, a bridge between you and the person who last pored over these continents. You imagine them sitting in a chair below, tracing the route to a distant colony or looking for the home of a relative who had emigrated to the New World. Their touch is still here, a ghostly vibration in the fibers of the paper. The attic seems to grow quieter as you study the map, the light from the window beginning to take on a deeper, more orange hue. The shadows of the rafters stretch across the pale yellow of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and for a moment, the world on the floor seems more real than the world outside. You feel the weight of history pressing down on the room, the thousands of stories and millions of lives that are contained within these faded lines. You are a giant standing over a dead world, a witness to the beautiful, futile attempt to freeze the earth in a single moment. Eventually, you begin to roll the map back up, your movements slow and rhythmic. The paper resists at first, having grown comfortable in its flat, illuminated state, but you guide it gently, feeling the tension of the linen as it coils back into a cylinder. The sound of the rolling is like a long, drawn-out sigh. You wrap the oilcloth around it once more, securing it with a piece of frayed twine, and tuck it back into its dark corner. The countries that no longer exist are returned to the shadows, where they will wait in their silent, rolled-up eternity for the next person to come seeking the geography of the past. The attic holds its breath, the dust settles once more, and you are left with the lingering image of a turquoise sea and the fading pink of a lost empire. Chapter 10. The sound of rain against the slate tiles as you sit on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of the map and the lingering scent of old ink, the atmosphere of the attic begins to undergo a subtle, rhythmic transformation. The brilliant, golden pillar of light that has dominated the room for the last hour starts to flicker and dim, as if a great, celestial curtain is being drawn across the sun. Outside, the sky has turned from a piercing, crystalline blue to a heavy, bruised violet, and the temperature in the room drops just a fraction of a degree, enough for you to feel a cool kiss of air against your skin. Then, it begins, the first, tentative messenger of the storm. A single, heavy drop of water strikes the slate tiles directly above your head with a sharp, metallic ring, followed by another, and then another, until the roof above you begins to vibrate with a slow and hypnotic percussion. This is the music of the attic in winter and spring, a sound that has played against these rafters for over 100 years. You lean back against a sturdy beam and close your eyes, letting the auditory landscape swallow you whole. The slate tiles, which felt so hot and dry only moments ago, are now being cooled by the relentless, rhythmic drumming of the rain. It is not a chaotic noise, it is a structured, architectural sound. Each tile has its own unique pitch, its own hollow resonance, depending on how it is fastened to the laths below. Some clicks are high and sharp, like a fingernail tapping on glass, while others are deep and muffled, like a distant drum heartbeat muffled by layers of wool. Together, they create a dense, shimmering field of sound that isolates you from the rest of the universe. The rain intensifies, and the rhythm quickens, moving from a scattered tapping to a steady, roaring wash. You can hear the water beginning to find its way along the ancient channels of the roof, gurgling in the cast-iron gutters with a deep, liquid throatiness. It is a sound of immense movement occurring just inches away from your stillness. Beyond the thin layer of stone and timber, the world is being lashed by a summer downpour, the trees swaying and the dust of the streets being washed into the earth. But here, inside the shell of the attic, you are perfectly dry, perfectly encased in a cocoon of wooden silence. The sound of the rain serves only to emphasize the depth of your sanctuary. It creates a boundary, a wall of white noise that shuts out the modern world even more effectively than the shadows did. You listen to the way the sound changes as the wind shifts. When the gust blows from the north, the rain lashes against the circular window, a frantic, scratching sound like the tiny claws of 1,000 birds trying to find their way inside. Then, as the wind dies down, the sound returns to the roof, becoming a heavy, vertical pressure, a rhythmic pounding that seems to vibrate in your very marrow. You find your own breathing beginning to synchronize with the storm. Inhale, as the rain builds to a crescendo exhale, as it settles into a steady, comforting drone. The attic seems to expand and contract with the moisture, the old wood letting out occasional, melodic groans as the humidity seeps into the joints of the rafters. In the dimness, the textures of the room become even more pronounced. The smell of the attic shifts once again, the dry cedar and old paper now mixed with the metallic, ozonic scent of damp stone and the earthy fragrance of the cooling roof. You can almost feel the weight of the water as it cascades over the slates, a heavy, liquid blanket that shields you from the sky. There is a profound sense of protection in this sound. It is the sound that children have listened to for generations, tucked under quilts in the rooms below, feeling the immense safety of a well-built house. In the attic, you are at the very point of impact, the first line of defense, and you feel the strength of the building as it absorbs the energy of the sky and turns it into a lullaby. As you sit in the near darkness, the only light remaining is a faint, silvery glow reflected from the wet slates outside, casting moving, watery shadows across the ceiling. These shadows ripple and flow like the surface of a river, dancing over the cobwebs and the edges of the old trunks. You find yourself in a state of deep, sensory immersion, where the boundary between your body and the room feels increasingly thin. You are no longer just a person in an attic, you are a part of the house, a part of the timber and the stone, listening to the ancient conversation between the earth and the sky. The rain is washing away the present, eroding the sharp edges of your worries and leaving behind only the smooth, polished stone of the immediate moment. The storm begins to reach its peak, the sound so loud now that it feels like a physical weight on your shoulders. Yet, it is not a frightening weight. It is the weight of a heavy blanket, the weight of a hand resting on a brow. You realize that this sound has not changed in a millennium. The rain sounded exactly like this to the people who first quarried the slate. It sounded like this to the carpenters who hammered the rafters into place. It will sound like this long after you have descended the stairs and returned to the world of clocks and schedules. There is an eternal quality to the rain against the roof, a rhythmic cycle that transcends the rise and fall of empires or the changing of maps. Slowly, the intensity begins to fade. The roar softens into a steady hum, and the hum breaks apart into individual, scattered droplets once again. You can hear the last of the water trickling through the downspouts, a fading, melodic tinkling that sounds like silver coins being dropped into a deep well. The silence that follows is even more profound than the silence that came before. It is a clean, washed silence, a silence that feels as though it has been scrubbed of all its dust and age. The air in the attic feels lighter, fresher, as if the house itself has taken a deep, refreshing breath. You remain still, listening to the final, rhythmic drips as they fall from the eaves onto the sodden ground below. The light begins to return, not as the fierce, golden fire of the afternoon, but as a soft, pearlescent glow that reflects off the damp world outside. The attic is changed. It feels renewed, as if the story of the past has been given a fresh page. You take one more deep breath of the rain-washed air, feeling the dampness in your lungs, and you realize that you have been initiated into one of the house's most private rituals. You have sat with the attic through the storm, and in return, it has given you a peace that is as solid and enduring as the slate tiles themselves. Chapter 11. The collection of seashells. The rain has moved on, leaving behind a sky of pale lavender and a quiet that feels as though it has been washed clean. In this new, soft light, you crawl toward a low shelf built directly into the eaves, where a row of glass jars stands in a silent, shimmering line. Your hand reaches for one in particular, a heavy, wide-mouthed jar of thick, hand-blown glass that has a slight greenish tint, like the water in a sheltered cove. As you lift it, the contents shift with a dry, rhythmic clatter, a sound that is both percussive and hollow. Inside, resting in a bed of fine, white sand that has settled at the bottom like a layer of fallen stars, is a collection of seashells. You unscrew the lid, and the seal breaks with a soft, papery resistance. Immediately, the dry air of the attic is pierced by a ghost of the ocean. It is a faint, briny scent, a mineral tang of salt and dried kelp that has been trapped in this glass tomb for half a century. You pour the shells out onto a piece of smooth, dark velvet that covers a nearby trunk, and they spill forth like a hoard of prehistoric jewels. There are hundreds of them, ranging from tiny, translucent spirals no larger than a grain of rice to heavy, porcelain-thick whelks that fit comfortably in the palm of your hand. You pick up a single scallop shell, its surface a radiating fan of ridges that mimic the rays of a setting sun. The colors are muted now, softened by time into shades of dusty rose, pale apricot, and a creamy, weathered white. As you run your thumb across the ridges, you feel the incredible, mathematical precision of the creature that once lived within. Each line is a record of growth, a rhythmic expansion of calcium and salt that occurred in the dark, rhythmic pull of the tides. The shell is cold to the touch, a dense and ancient coldness that feels as though it has retained the temperature of the deep Atlantic. It is a piece of bonework from a world that knows nothing of attics or sunlight, yet here it is, held in the golden light of a summer afternoon. Beside the scallop lies a turret shell, a long, elegant spiral that tapers to a point as sharp as a needle. You hold it up to the light, and you can see the translucency of the walls, the way the light glows through the calcium like a candle behind a silk screen. It is a masterpiece of geometry, a physical manifestation of the Fibonacci sequence, winding inward toward an infinite, unseen center. You imagine the child who found this, walking along a shoreline that perhaps no longer exists, bending down to rescue this tiny, perfect sculpture from the crushing weight of the surf. Each shell in this jar is a captured moment of discovery, a souvenir of a day spent in the wind and the spray, now reduced to a silent artifact in a wooden room. You find a piece of sea glass among the shells, a fragment of a green bottle that has been tumbled by the waves until every sharp edge has been worn into a soft, frosted curve. It feels like a worry stone in your hand, smooth and oddly comforting. It is a bridge between the human world and the natural one, something we made, broken, and then reclaimed by the rhythm of the ocean until it became as beautiful as a gemstone. It shares the same frosted texture as the shells, a result of the relentless friction of sand and water. You place it back on the velvet, and it glows with a soft, emerald light, a captured fragment of the sea floor resting on the dusty floorboards. Then, you pick up a large, heavy conch shell, its exterior a rugged, limestone grey, but its interior a shocking, vibrant pink, as smooth as the finer silk. This is the classic vessel of childhood wonder. You follow the curve of the aperture with your index finger, feeling the transition from the rough, weathered outside to the polished, porcelain white of the inner chamber. It is a sanctuary of form. Without thinking, you lift the shell to your ear, pressing the cool, hard rim against your temple. And there it is, the sound. It is a deep, resonant hollow roar, a rhythmic white noise that your mind immediately translates as the crashing of distant waves. You know, logically, that you are hearing the echo of your own blood rushing through your veins, amplified by the acoustics of the hollow chamber, but in the stillness of the attic, that logic falls away. To you, in this moment, it is the sound of the world's oceans, a subterranean hum that has been vibrating inside this shell since it was pulled from sand. It is a sound that matches the rhythm of your own breathing, a slow, surging swell that rises and falls, rises and falls. You close your eyes, the shell pressed to your ear, and the attic seems to vanish. The scent of cedar is replaced by the smell of salt. Spray the warmth of the sun through the window becomes the heat of the sun on a white beach. You feel the immense, heavy peace of the tides, the way the ocean breathes in and out, indifferent to the passage of human time. The shell is a telephone to the infinite. It connects this small, dust-filled room to the vast, watery lungs of the planet. You find yourself sinking into a deep, meditative trance, the roar of the shell becoming a blanket of sound that covers the ticking of the clocks and the creaking of the floorboards. As you sit there, the weight of the shell begins to feel like a part of your own hand. You realize that these shells are the ultimate survivors. They are made of the same minerals as your own bones, yet they are destined to last far longer than any of the silk dresses or paper maps in this room. They are the artifacts of a life that is governed not by years or decades, but by the moon and the stars. You feel a profound sense of scale, a realization that your own life is but a single grain of sand on a vast and eternal shore. This realization does not make you feel small, it makes you feel part of the whole, a single thread in the great, rhythmic tapestry of the universe. Slowly, you lower the shell from your ear. The silence of the attic returns, but it is different now. It is filled with the afterimage of the ocean's roar. You begin to gather the shells back into the jar, one by one. You do this with a slow and deliberate rhythm, listening to the melodic clink and clack as they settle back into the sand. Each sound is a note in a tiny, glass-bound symphony. You place the scallop, the turret, the sea glass, and finally the heavy conch back into their home. You screw the lid back on, trapping the salt air once more within the greenish glass. As you place the jar back on its shelf, you feel a sense of completion. You have touched the edge of the sea in the middle of a wooden house. You have heard the roar of the deep in a room filled with dust. The shells remain there, in their silent, glass world, waiting for the next time the light hits them just right, and the next person to listen to their eternal, rhythmic song. Chapter 12. The ghostly echo of grandfather's pipe. As you move away from a shelf of seashells, the air in this particular corner of the attic grows darker and more concentrated, as if the shadows here have been steeped like tea. You find yourself standing before a small, side table with 3 spindly legs, upon which rests a heavy, circular glass ashtray and a single, well-loved briar pipe. Beside it sits a small, rectangular tin with a hinged lid, its surface decorated with the faded image of a tall ship and the words "Old Mariner's Blend." This corner does not smell of the salt spray you just left behind, nor does it carry the medicinal sharpness of the cedar. Instead, it holds a deep, rich, and profoundly masculine aroma, the lingering, ghostly echo of cherry tobacco and old wool. You reach out and pick up the pipe. It is surprisingly heavy, the bowl carved from a dense, gnarled root of Mediterranean heath, polished by the friction of 1,000 afternoons into a surface as smooth as a river stone. The wood is a deep, glowing mahogany, but near the top of the bowl, it is charred to a velvety black where the fire once lived. As you hold it, your thumb naturally finds the indentation on the side of the bowl, a hollow worn perfectly into the wood by the repeated pressure of a specific hand. You fit your own thumb into the groove, and the connection is instantaneous. You are touching the physical signature of a person, a rhythmic habit that was repeated daily for decades until the wood itself surrendered to the shape of the man. You lift the pipe to your face and inhale. The scent is intoxicatingly complex. It is a thick, syrupy sweetness, like black cherries simmering on a stove, mixed with the smoky, leathery undertone of Latakia tobacco. Underneath it all is the smell of the briarwood itself, a nutty, earthy fragrance that has been seasoned by heat and time. It is a scent that evokes a specific kind of peace, the peace of a study after dinner, of a newspaper being unfolded, of a man lost in thought while the rain drums against the window. It is the smell of contemplation. To breathe it in is to feel the frantic pace of the modern world slow down to the speed of a rising plume of smoke. You set the pipe down and turn your attention to the tobacco tin. The metal is cool and slightly textured where the paint has begun to bubble and flake. You find the small indentation for the thumb and lift the lid. The sound is a soft, metallic scrape followed by a faint pop as the vacuum of years is finally broken. Inside, there is a small amount of tobacco remaining, now dried into brittle, blackened curls that look like the shavings from a dark forest floor. The scent that rushes out is concentrated and sharp, a burst of fermented plum and campfire smoke that makes the back of your throat tingle. It is the scent of a routine, a ritual that once marked the passage of time in this house more accurately than any clock. Beside the tin lies a discarded cardigan, draped over the back of a small wooden chair. It is made of a heavy, coarse wool, knitted in a pattern of thick cables that resemble the twisting roots of an ancient tree. You touch the sleeve, and the wool is rough and honest, full of the tiny knots and imperfections of hand-spun yarn. This garment has absorbed the life of its wearer. It smells of the tobacco, yes, but also of the cold morning air, of the wood smoke from the fireplace downstairs, and of the faint, clean scent of lye soap. It is a second skin, a woolen shell that once held the warmth of a living body. You find yourself imagining the rhythm of the life that inhabited this corner. The slow, methodical cleaning of the pipe with a small metal tool, the rhythmic tamping of the tobacco into the bowl, the strike of a long wooden match against the underside of the table. You can almost see the flare of the flame, the way it would have illuminated the crags and valleys of an aging face for a brief, brilliant second before being drawn down into the tobacco. Then, the first long, slow exhale, a cloud of silver-blue smoke rising into the rafters, mingling with the dust motes to create a shifting, ephemeral geography of its own. There is a profound dignity in these objects. They were not bought to be discarded, they were bought to be used, to be maintained, and to be lived with until they became an extension of the self. The pipe, the tin, and the cardigan are a trinity of comfort. They represent a time when silence was not something to be feared or filled with noise, but something to be cultivated. You sit on the edge of the small chair, careful not to disturb the drape of the wool, and you let the stillness of the corner envelop you. You feel as though you are sitting with a ghost, but it is a benevolent presence, a shadow of a man who knew the value of a slow afternoon and the rhythmic beauty of a well-lived life. The sunlight, now leaning toward the west, catches the glass of the ashtray, sending a refracted beam of light across the bowl of the pipe. For a moment, the charred rim seems to glow, as if a spark of the old fire still remains deep within the wood. You find yourself breathing in a slow, rhythmic pattern, mimicking the long, steady draws of a pipe smoker. Your heart rate settles into a calm, even thrum. The attic is no longer just a storehouse for things, it is a storehouse for the essence of people. Every object here is a vessel, holding a specific frequency of human existence. You reach out and close the tobacco tin, the lid snapping shut with a finality that echoes through the quiet room. You leave the pipe resting in its ashtray, a silent sculpture of wood and memory. As you stand up and prepare to move to the next chapter of the attic's history, you carry the scent of the cherry tobacco with you, a sweet, smoky ghost that lingers in your hair and on your skin. You realize that the people of the past are never truly gone as long as their rituals remain. The grandfather who sat in this chair, the man who watched the smoke rise into these same rafters, is still here in the grain of the briar and the weave of the wool. You move forward with a sense of reverence, your footsteps soft on the dusty boards, feeling the weight of the generations pressing gently against your back, guiding you deeper into the golden, sun-pulled heart of the childhood afternoon. Chapter 13. A journal of ink and pressed ferns having left the lingering warmth of the pipe smoke corner, you find yourself drawn toward a low, sloping section of the attic where a small writing desk of scarred mahogany stands in solitude. Its surface is cluttered with the tools of a quiet mind, a heavy glass inkwell, now dry and crusted with indigo salt, and a single, slender journal bound in green leather that has darkened with age to the color of a deep, mossy forest. You approach this desk with a sense of intrusion, as if the person who last sat here has only just stepped away to watch the sunset from the garden below. The chair, a simple wooden thing with a curved back, is pulled out at an inviting angle, and as you sit, the wood lets out a long, rhythmic groan that seems to settle into the very foundations of the house. The journal is the center of this world. You reach out, and your palm rests on the leather cover. It is cool and waxy, the texture of a dried leaf, and the gold leaf lettering on the spine has been worn away by the repeated friction of a thumb and forefinger. This book was a confidant. It held the secrets that were too heavy for the air, the observations that were too delicate for the tongue. You lift the cover, and the binding gives way with a soft, papery crackle, the sound of 100 years of stillness being broken. As the pages fall open, a new scent rises to greet you, a sharp, metallic fragrance of iron gall ink mixed with the dry, grassy smell of vellum and the sweet, decomposing scent of pressed botanicals. Inside, the pages are a pale, buttery cream, the edges foxed with small, brown spots like the freckles on a weathered hand. The handwriting is a work of art in itself, a flowing, cursive script that marches across the lines with a rhythmic, hypnotic consistency. The ink is not a flat black, it is a deep, translucent violet that pulls in the loops of the letters, showing the varying pressure of the nib as it moved across the paper. You can see where the writer paused to think, leaving a small, dark blotch of ink, and where the pen hurried along, the lines growing thin and elegant as the thoughts outpaced the hand. It is a physical record of a consciousness, a cardiogram of a soul that lived in this house during a time when communication was a slow and deliberate act of creation. Between the pages, tucked away like hidden treasures, are more specimens of the natural world. Here is a single, perfect fern frond, its delicate, feathery leaves flattened into a silhouette of bronze lace. Unlike the flowers in the cardboard box, these ferns were meant to illustrate the text, to serve as a biological punctuation to the entries of the journal. You run your finger along the page, and you can feel the slight indentation where the fern has pressed its shape into the paper over 70 years of closure. The paper has absorbed the oils of the plant, creating a ghostly, translucent halo around the frond. On the facing page, the ink describes a walk through a wooded valley, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the sound of a hidden stream. By reading the words and seeing the plant, you are transported across time, experiencing the sensory reality of a Tuesday in May 1898. You turn the pages slowly, and the rhythm of the paper becomes a form of meditation. Each flip of a leaf is a soft, dry whisper that fills the small space beneath the eaves. You find sketches, small, precise pencil drawings of the view from the attic window, the same window that is currently casting a long, rectangular shadow across the desk. In the sketch, the trees in the garden are smaller, the roof of the neighbor's house is a different shape, and a carriage stands in the lane where a car might be parked today. The drawing is a map of a vanished present, a way of anchoring the self in a world that was already beginning to change. The graphite of the pencil has a soft, silvery sheen that catches the afternoon light, making the lines appear to vibrate with a ghostly energy. There is something profoundly intimate about reading a handwritten journal in the place where it was written. You feel the presence of the writer in the room, not as a frightening spectre, but as a quiet companion. You find yourself matching your breathing to the rhythm of the prose, the long, descriptive sentences drawing you into a state of deep, focused calm. The writer talks of the quality of the light, the way the shadows move across the floorboards, and the deep, abiding silence of the afternoon. It is as if they were writing this for you, for the person who would eventually find their way up the secret stairs to rediscover the peace they had so carefully documented. In the back of the journal, you find a small envelope tucked into a pocket in the leather binding. Inside is a lock of hair, tied with a thin, faded blue ribbon. The hair is a pale, shimmering gold, looking as fresh and vibrant as the day it was cut, a startling contrast to the dry, darkened world of the attic. It is a piece of a living person, a physical fragment of a life that has been preserved in this paper sanctuary. You do not touch it, it feels too sacred, too fragile for the reach of the present. Instead, you look at the ink on the envelope, which simply reads, Aurelia, age 5. The name is a melody from a forgotten song, a spark of humanity that illuminates the entire room. The sun is beginning to sink lower now, and the light on the desk is turning to a deep, resonant copper. The shadows of your own hands are long and thin across the pages of the journal. You realize that you are part of a continuous chain of observers. The writer watched the afternoon fade, just as you are watching it now. They felt the same coolness in the air as the storm passed, and the same warmth of the wood beneath their elbows. The journal is the bridge that allows these two moments to touch. It is a vessel of continuity, proving that while the maps may change and the clocks may stop, the human experience of a quiet afternoon remains unchanged through the centuries. You stay at the desk until the light is too dim to read the flowing script. You feel a sense of profound stillness, a weightlessness of the mind that comes from being fully immersed in the history of another. The desk, the inkwell, and the journal are not just objects, they are an altar to the act of noticing. They remind you that life is not made of great events, but of the small, rhythmic details of the existence, the way a fern curls, the color of the ink, the sound of a pen scratching across vellum. You close the journal with a slow and reverent movement, the green leather feeling soft and warm under your hands. You leave it exactly where you found it, centered on the mahogany desk, a silent testament to the enduring power of the written word and the eternal beauty of a childhood afternoon. Chapter 14. The stack of envelopes tied in blue ribbon as you rise from the writing desk, your legs feeling heavy and slow as if moving through invisible honey, you find yourself drawn toward a low wooden crate that sits in the path of the waning sun. Perched atop the crate, as if it had been placed there with deliberate care just moments ago, is a bundle of letters. They are tied together with a silk ribbon that was once a vibrant, sky blue, but has now faded into the color of a winter horizon, a pale, dusty cerulean that frays at the edges where the knot was pulled tight. The bundle is thick, a dense accordion of correspondence that represents years of distance and devotion, held together by nothing more than a fragile piece of woven thread. You reach out and lift the stack. The weight of it is surprising. It has the density of a small brick, a physical manifestation of thousands upon thousands of words. The envelopes are made of a heavy, rag-based paper, their surfaces textured like fine linen. As you run your thumb along the edge of the stack, the paper makes a dry, rhythmic sound, a series of soft clicks that sound like the wings of a moth beating against a lampshade. Each envelope is a different shade of aged white, some the color of fresh cream, others the deep, toasted yellow of a sun-baked field, and a few a ghostly, translucent grey. The handwriting on the topmost envelope is different from the journal you just left. It is a bold, masculine hand, the letters leaning forward with an urgent, kinetic energy. The ink is a dark sepia, and the postmarks are a series of overlapping circles, black and authoritative, bearing the names of cities you saw on the faded map. Bombay, Alexandria, Marseille. You can see the faint indentations of the postal stamps, the jagged edges of the Queen's profile or a distant harbour, their colours, reds and greens, still surprisingly vivid against the muted paper. These letters have travelled across oceans and continents, carried in the holds of steamships and the leather bags of postmen, only to end their journey here, in the absolute stillness of this attic. You carefully slide the ribbon down, allowing the bundle to breathe. The letters expand slightly, the paper relaxing after decades of compression. You pick up the first envelope and feel the weight of the folded sheets within. The paper is crisp and brittle, crackling with a sharp, rhythmic protest as you slide the letter out. As it unfolds, a faint, lingering scent escapes the fibers, not the cedar of the room, but a ghost of something far away. It is the smell of old sandalwood and the dry, metallic tang of a ship's cabin, mixed with the faint, sweet residue of a long-evaporated cologne. It is the scent of a person who was always in motion, writing to someone who was always waiting. The words on the page are a rhythmic flow of life. They speak of the heat of the Red Sea, the taste of salt on the lips, and the way the stars look when there is no land for 1,000 miles. You find yourself reading not just the words, but the spaces between them. There is a profound rhythm in the way the sentences are constructed, the long, looping descriptions of the horizon followed by the short, aching sentences of longing. I am thinking of the garden, one line reads, and the way the light hits the round window in the attic at 4 o'clock. You look up at the window, and the synchronicity of the moment sends a quiet shiver through the room. The letter is a mirror, reflecting the very reality you are currently inhabiting, but from a distance of 100 years. You notice that many of the envelopes have been opened with a letter opener, the edges clean and precise, while others have been torn with a frantic, impatient hand. This variation tells a story of its own, the changing moods of the recipient, the days when the arrival of the post was a measured ritual, and the days when it was a desperate lifeline. You see the faint, circular stains where a teacup was set down on a letter, and the places where the ink is blurred, perhaps from a drop of rain or a fallen tear. These marks are the fingerprints of emotion, the physical evidence of the impact these words had on the person who sat in this very spot, reading by the fading light. There is a strange, hypnotic quality to the way the letters are organized. They are in chronological order, a paper trail of a relationship that evolved through the decades. You see the handwriting change, the ink becoming steadier as the years pass, the topics shifting from the excitement of travel to the quiet concerns of the home and the hearth. It is a life lived in increments of 3 weeks, the time it took for a ship to cross the sea. The letters are the heartbeat of that distance, a rhythmic pulse of I am here and I am still yours. In the silence of the attic, these voices feel remarkably loud, their presence filling the shadows with the echoes of old conversations. You find a small, pressed leaf of a tropical plant tucked into one of the letters. It is dark and leathery, unlike the delicate ferns of the journal. It is a piece of another world, a physical proof of the traveller's claims. You hold it up to the light, and you can see the dense, exotic veins, a geometry that belongs to a jungle thousands of miles away. It feels out of place in the dry, cedar-scented air of the attic, yet it has become a part of the house's history, a tiny, green immigrant that has lived in the dark for a century. As you look at the stack, you realize that these letters represent the opposite of the attic stillness. They represent the vastness of the world, the noise of the ports, and the endless movement of the sea. Yet, they have been gathered here, tied with a blue ribbon, and turned into a part of the stillness. They have been tamed by the attic. The oceans they describe are now just ink on paper. The heat they complain of is now just a memory in a cold room. The attic has a way of absorbing the energy of the world and turning it into a long, golden dream. The sun is now a thin, orange sliver on the horizon, and the shadows of the rafters have merged into a single, deep violet gloom. You carefully gather the letters back into a neat stack, ensuring that the edges are aligned. You slide the blue ribbon back over the paper, tightening the knot with a slow, rhythmic pull. The silk feels cool and smooth against your skin, a final, soft contact with the past. You place the bundle back on the wooden crate, exactly where it was, a silent monument to the power of the written word and the endurance of human connection. You stand there for a moment, the rhythm of the letters still vibrating in your mind. You feel the weight of all those miles and all those years, held in a simple stack of paper. The attic continues to breathe, the air growing cooler as the night approaches, and you move forward, your heart full of the voices of the past, seeking the next fragment of the childhood afternoon that forever pulls in this high, secret place. Chapter 15. The rocking horse's rhythmic creak in the deepening twilight of the attic's far corner, where the roofline descends so low that the shadows seem to press against the floorboards, stands a figure of silent, wooden strength. It is a rocking horse, a magnificent relic of a craftsmanship that favored weight, durability, and a lifelike grace. Even in the gloom, you can discern the dappled grey of its coat, a pattern of hand-painted circles that have faded and cracked like the surface of an old fresco. You move toward it, your footsteps now entirely silent on the thick dust, feeling the air grow colder as you leave the warmth of the sun-drenched centre. The horse is mounted on heavy wooden rockers, two long, elegant arcs of solid ash that have been worn smooth by a century of movement. As you reach out to touch the manere, you find it is made of genuine horsehair, coarse and stiff, smelling of old dust and the faint, lingering scent of stable hay. The hair is matted in places, tangled with the invisible threads of the weaver's silk, but as you run your fingers through it, the strands separate with a dry, rhythmic rustle. It is a tactile connection to a creature that was once the center of a child's universe, a vessel for imaginary journeys across vast, wooden plains. You place your hand on the saddle, which is crafted from a dark, cracked leather. It is cold and hard, the seat shaped by the weight of generations of children who once gripped the reins with white-knuckled excitement. The brass stirrups hang low, tarnished to a dull, matte black, but still holding the sturdy, functional weight of their era. There is an incredible sense of latent energy in the object, a feeling that it is merely paused, waiting for the light touch that will set its world back into motion. You lean your weight against the horse's flank, and for the first time in decades, the rockers begin to shift. The movement starts as a slow, infinitesimal tilt. Then, as gravity takes hold, the horse begins to sway. The sound that erupts from the floorboards is a deep, melodic groan, a rhythmic symphony of wood against wood. It is a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your feet before you hear it in your ears. Each forward tilt brings a sharp, structural click, followed by a long, drawing moan as the ash rockers slide back across the grain of the oak floor. It is the sound of a pendulum, a mechanical heartbeat that measures out the time not in seconds, but in the slow, sweeping arcs of a childhood dream. As the horse rocks, the dappled grey of its body moves through the alternating bands of shadow and the faint, silvery light of the rising moon. It looks like a ghost ship navigating a dark and silent sea. You watch the rhythm of the motion, the way the head of the horse, with its flared nostrils and wide, glass eyes, rises and falls against the backdrop of the rafters. The eyes are amber-coloured, catching the dim light and reflecting it back with a fierce, unwavering intensity. In the rhythmic swaying, the horse seems to reclaim its vitality. It is no longer a discarded toy, it is a creature of the wind and the wood, reclaiming the space it once occupied in the heart of the house. The smell of the motion begins to fill the air, a mixture of disturbed dust, the smell of friction-heated wood, and the old, animal scent of the leather and hair. It is an intoxicating, hypnotic aroma that pulls you deeper into a trance. You find yourself swaying in time with the rockers, your body unconsciously matching the frequency of the wooden horse. The attic seems to pulse in time with the movement. The rafters, the trunks, the maps, and the dolls all seem to vibrate with this newfound rhythm. It is as if the rocking horse is the conductor of the attic's silent orchestra, and its movement has finally allowed the music of the past to play. You imagine the countless afternoons when this sound was the only soundtrack to a rainy day. You see the blur of a child's legs, the grip of small hands on the wooden handles, the fierce determination in the eyes of a young rider heading toward a horizon that existed only within these four walls. The rocking horse was a bridge between the physical world of the house and the limitless world of the imagination. Every creak of the wood was a mile traveled, every thud of the rockers was a mountain crossed. Now, in the twilight of the attic, those journeys are over, yet the horse remains, a silent witness to the power of play. The motion begins to slow as the initial energy you provided dissipates into the floor. The arcs grow shorter, the pauses at the peak of each tilt grow longer, and the melodic groaning of the wood descends into a series of soft, rhythmic sighs. Each oscillation is a little quieter than the last, a gradual return to the absolute stillness that governs this place. You watch with a sense of quiet reverence as the horse finds its center once more. The final movement is so subtle it is almost invisible, a tiny, lingering tremor in the stirrups, and then, silence. The rocking horse stands perfectly still again, its dappled grey coat merging back into the shadows. But the air around it feels different now. It is charged with the memory of the movement, the echo of the rhythm still vibrating in the rafters. You feel a profound sense of peace, the kind that comes from a long journey finally reaching its end. You realize that the attic is not a place where things come to die, but a place where they come to rest, their stories held in the grain of the wood and the fibers of the silk, waiting for the rhythmic touch that will wake them for a brief, golden moment. You turn away from the horse, leaving it in its dark corner, and as you move back toward the center of the room, you find that your own gait has taken on a rhythmic, swaying quality. You are carrying the motion of the horse within you, a silent, internal pendulum that keeps time with the heart of the house. The attic remains a sea of shadow and silver light, a vast and secret archive where the sun forever pulls and the memories of childhood afternoons wait in the stillness, forever and ever. Chapter 16. The view from the round window stepping away from the silent rocking horse, you find yourself drawn toward the very edge of the house, where the roofline reaches its peak and the gable wall holds the attic's only eye upon the world. This is the round window, a perfect circle of glass set deep within a frame of weathered stone and dark, iron-reinforced oak. As you approach, the floorboards beneath you feel warmer, having absorbed the final, horizontal rays of the sinking sun. You move with a slow, rhythmic deliberation, feeling the transition from the interior shadows to the luminous, pearlescent glow that surrounds the window like a halo. This is the threshold between the internal memory of the house and the external reality of the turning earth. You reach the window and lean your forehead against the cool, thick glass. The sensation is immediate, a sharp, refreshing contrast to the dry heat of the attic. The glass is not the flat, perfect surface of modern manufacture, it is old, artisanal glass, full of character and imperfection. As you move your head slightly, the world outside ripples and flows like the surface of a pond. You see tiny, frozen bubbles trapped within the pane, microscopic lungs that have held the air of another century. They are seeds and reams in the glass, subtle, wavy distortions that transform the trees in the garden below into elegant, swaying spectres. It is as if the window itself is a lens of time, softening the edges of the present and turning the landscape into a living watercolor. Through this circular frame, you look out upon the world of childhood afternoons. The garden below is a deep, resonant green, the shadows of the old elms stretching long and thin across the grass like the fingers of a giant. You can see the rhythmic swaying of the branches, a slow, hypnotic movement that matches the pulsing of the air in the room behind you. The light is different here, it is the golden hour, that brief, magical interval when the sun is low enough to ignite the very atmosphere. The air outside looks thick, like liquid amber, and every leaf, every blade of grass, and every stone in the garden wall is edged with a thin, brilliant line of fire. From this height, the world seems silent and toy shop still. You see the gravel path where you once ran, its white stones now glowing with a soft, orange light. You see the rusted iron gate, half hidden by a tangle of honeysuckle and wild roses, standing as a silent guardian to the lane beyond. The lane itself is empty, a winding ribbon of grey dust that disappears into the shadows of the woods. There is a profound sense of distance, not just in space, but in time. You feel as though you are looking down at a world that is moving at a different speed than your own. Down there, the wind is blowing, the birds are seeking their nests, and the flowers are beginning to close for the night. Up here, in the sanctuary of the round window, everything is suspended in a state of eternal, golden grace. You notice a small, hand-carved notch in the wooden windowsill, a little V that someone once cut with a pocket knife to mark the exact spot where the sun sets on the longest day of the year. You run your finger over the indentation, feeling the rough grain of the wood and the smoothness of the aged patina. This window has been a calendar for a century. It has watched the seasons cycle with a rhythmic, unwavering constancy. The white blanket of winter, the emerald explosion of spring, the heavy, humid gold of summer, and the brittle, copper fires of autumn. Each year has left a layer of dust on the frame and a new line of silver on the glass, yet the view remains fundamentally the same. It is a view of continuity, a promise that the world will always return to this quiet, sun-pulled state. As you gaze through the glass, you see a bird, a swift, arc across the circle of the window. It is a sudden, rhythmic flash of dark wings against the violet sky, a movement so swift and graceful that it leaves a lingering trail in your mind. The bird vanishes into the eaves of the roof above you, its homecoming marked by a faint, muffled scuttle that vibrates through the rafters. You realize that you are sharing this house with 100 hidden lives: the swifts in the roof, the spiders in the corners, the mice in the walls. They all exist within the rhythm of the house, their heartbeats synchronized with the expansion and contraction of the timber. The sky begins to transition from gold to a deep, bruised indigo at the horizon, while the zenith remains a pale, ethereal turquoise. You watch the first star appear, a tiny, shivering point of silver light that pierces through the velvet gloom. It is perfectly framed by the round window, a celestial jewel set in a wooden ring. The light from the star feels infinitely old, having traveled across the void to reach this specific pane of glass, this specific attic, and your specific eyes. In this moment, the scale of the universe and the scale of the attic become one. You are a part of the starlight, a part of the shadows, and a part of the rhythmic turning of the planet. The air in the attic is growing darker now, the outlines of the trunks and the furniture blurring into soft, indistinct shapes. But the window remains a source of light, a glowing portal that holds the last remnants of the day. You find yourself breathing in a slow, deep rhythm, your lungs filling with the cooling air. You feel a sense of immense perspective. From this high, circular vantage point, the worries and noises of the world below seem inconsequential. They are like the dust motes, tiny, drifting things that have no power over the silence. You stay at the window until the garden below is swallowed by the night, and only the silhouettes of the trees remain. The glass is now a dark mirror, reflecting your own face back at you, a pale ghost floating in a wooden frame. You look at your reflection, and for a heartbeat, you see the child you once were, standing in this same spot, looking out at the same stars with the same sense of wonder. The window has held that image for you, preserving it in the silvering of the glass and the stillness of the air. You turn away slowly, the rhythm of the window's pace settled deep within your chest, ready to move back into the heart of the attic, where the darkness is not an end, but a beginning of a deeper, more secret history. Chapter 17. The mirror of dappled silver leaving the round window, you navigate back through the deepening indigo of the attic central aisle. The darkness here is not an absence, but a presence, a thick, velvet texture that seems to absorb the sound of your movements. In a narrow passage between a stack of moth-eaten rugs and a collection of old picture frames, you encounter a tall, slender object draped in a heavy, linen sheet. The fabric is stiff with age, its surface covered in a fine, grey powder that feels like pulverized silk. You reach out and grasp the edge of the sheet, the material cold and dry beneath your hand, and with a single, rhythmic motion, you pull it away. Revealed before you is a cheval mirror, a tall, oval glass held within a frame of dark, carved mahogany. The wood is shaped into intricate vines and leaves that seem to twist and grow in the dim light, their surfaces polished to a deep, resonant glow. But it is the glass itself that commands your attention. It is not the perfect, flat surface of a modern mirror, it is an antique plate of heavy glass, silvered with a mercury backing that has begun to age and decay in a beautiful, rhythmic pattern. Around the edges, the silvering has oxidized, creating a mottled, dappled effect like the surface of a frozen pond or the wings of a moth. You stand before it, and your reflection emerges from the depths of the glass like a figure rising through dark water. Because of the aging silver, the image is soft and ethereal, stripped of the harsh clarity of the present day. You look at yourself, and you see not just who you are now, but a version of yourself that belongs to the history of this house. The imperfections in the glass, the tiny bubbles, the subtle waves, the spots of tarnish, transform your reflection into a living portrait. You see your eyes, dark and deep in the gloom, and the way the faint, silvery light from the round window catches the edge of your shoulder, turning you into a figure of shadow and starlight. As you move slightly, the reflections in the room around you begin to shift and dance within the frame. You see the reflection of the rafters above, their dark shapes distorted by the waves in the glass, appearing like the ribs of a great, wooden whale. You see the ghostly glint of the brass latches on the nearby trunks and the soft, white blur of the porcelain doll sitting in the distance. The mirror is a collector of ghosts. It holds within its silver depths every image that has ever passed before it. You imagine the generations of people who have stood in this exact spot, adjusting a hat, smoothing a dress, or simply staring into their own eyes as they contemplated the mystery of their lives. Their reflections are still there, laid beneath yours in the prehistoric sediment of the mercury. There is a profound, rhythmic stillness in the mirror's gaze. It does not judge, it only witnesses. You find yourself leaning closer, your breath creating a faint, rhythmic bloom of mist on the cold surface of the glass. In that mist, The world vanishes for a moment, leaving only the sensation of your own warmth against the ancient chill. As the mist clears, your reflection returns, seemingly deeper and more substantial than before. You notice the way the dappled silvering at the bottom of the frame looks like a forest of frost, a crystalline landscape that has grown over the decades in the absolute dark. It is a reminder that even in the absence of light, things are growing, changing, and evolving. The mirror creates a sense of infinite space within the cramped confines of the attic. By reflecting the room back upon itself, it doubles the shadows and multiplies the light, creating a labyrinth of wood and glass that defies the physical boundaries of the walls. You feel a strange, rhythmic pull, as if you could step through the frame and enter the world of the silvered past, a world where the air is made of lavender and cedar, and where the sun never truly sets. In the mirror, the attic feels like a cathedral, a vast and sacred space dedicated to the preservation of the soul. You reach out and touch the mahogany frame, feeling the cool, rhythmic curves of the carved vines. The wood is solid and grounding, a stark contrast to the fluid, shifting world within the glass. You realize that the mirror is the ultimate record of the childhood afternoon. It has caught the light of 1,000 sunsets and held them in its depths. It has seen the children grow into adults and the adults fade into memory. It is a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a silent observer that remains unchanged while everything around it crumbles and turns to dust. The light in the attic is now almost gone, leaving only a thin, silver thread of moonbeams to illuminate the frame. The mirror becomes a pool of liquid shadow, its surface shimmering with a dark, metallic luster. You stand there for a long time, lost in the dialogue between the reflection and the reality. You feel your own identity beginning to blur, your sense of self merging with the history of the house. You are no longer an intruder, you are a part of the mirror's collection, a new layer of silvering on the glass of time. Slowly, you pick up the linen sheet and begin to drape it back over the mirror. The movement is slow and rhythmic, the fabric falling in heavy, graceful folds that swallow the glass once more. The world of the silvered pond disappears, returning to the darkness where it belongs. As the mirror is covered, the attic feels smaller again, more intimate and contained. You leave the tall, draped figure in its narrow passage, a silent guardian of the reflections that have been. You move forward into the final shadows of the room, your mind full of the dappled light and the ancient glass, feeling the peace of the afternoon settling into a deep, nocturnal rest. Chapter 18. The old gramophone and the unplayed record leaving the shrouded mirror, you find yourself in the deepest, most central part of the attic, a place where the air feels as thick and still as the water at the bottom of a well. Here, standing on a low, ornate pedestal of dark wood, is the gramophone. It is a machine of elegant, rhythmic geometry, a masterpiece of early engineering that seems to bridge the gap between the world of physics and the world of dreams. Its most striking feature is the great morning glory horn, a magnificent funnel of hand-painted tin that blooms out of the wooden base like a giant, metallic flower. The horn is a deep, royal blue on the outside, but as your gaze travels inward, it transitions into a soft, faded cream, its edges lined with a delicate, golden filigree that has partially succumbed to the slow oxidation of the years. You approach the machine with a sense of profound reverence, feeling the cool, dry air of the attic vibrate with the potential of a forgotten sound. The wooden base of the gramophone is a rich, dark mahogany, polished to such a degree that it reflects the faint, silvery moonlight in long, liquid streaks. You reach out and touch the winding crank, a heavy iron handle tipped with a grip of turned bone. It is cold and solid, a tool designed for a time when things required a physical, rhythmic effort to be brought to life. You do not turn it, you simply rest your hand upon it, feeling the immense tension of the coiled spring deep within the mahogany box. That spring is a reservoir of stored time, a mechanical memory waiting for the release that would set the turntable into its hypnotic, circular dance. On the felt-covered platter of the turntable lies a single, heavy record. It is a disc of thick, black shellac, its surface etched with a microscopic, spiral labyrinth of grooves. The label in the center is a vibrant, primary red, featuring the image of a small white dog listening intently to a horn just like the one before you. The title of the piece is written in a formal, blocky script that has begun to yellow. Valster Eladieu. You lean in close, your eyes tracing the rhythmic curves of the grooves. Every scratch, every tiny speck of dust on that black surface is a potential sound, a hidden vibration that has been held in a state of suspended animation for decades. This record is a physical map of a moment in time, a frozen performance that only requires a needle and a rotation to become a living thing once more. Beside the platter, the tone arm rests in its cradle, a slender limb of polished nickel that looks like the neck of a silver swan. At its tip is the sound box, a complex assembly of diaphragms and levers that holds the needle. You look at the needle itself, a tiny, sharp spike of steel that has become slightly rusted at the base. This is the point of contact, the bridge between the physical matter of the record and the invisible waves of the air. It is a fragile, delicate thing, yet it holds the power to resurrect the voices of the past. You imagine the moment when that needle would first touch the shellac, the soft, rhythmic hiss of the leading groove, followed by the sudden, orchestral swell of a violin that has not been heard since before the wars. The scent around the gramophone is unique to the machinery of the past. It is a mixture of dry, lubricating oil, the sweet, resinous smell of the shellac, and the metallic tang of the tin horn. It is a scent that speaks of parlors and velvet curtains, of evenings spent in the glow of gaslight while the music filled the house. As you stand there, the silence of the attic seems to take on a rhythmic quality, a pulsing expectation that matches the circular shape of the record. You find yourself swaying almost imperceptibly, your body responding to a music that isn't playing, a phantom waltz that exists only in the memory of the room. The morning glory horn is directed toward the center of the attic, its wide mouth ready to amplify even the smallest vibration. You imagine the sound waves pouring out of that blue funnel, a golden stream of melody that would wash over the trunks, the maps, and the porcelain doll. In the presence of the gramophone, the objects in the attic seem to lean forward, as if they too are waiting for the needle to drop. The rocking horse, the mirror, the old cedar chest, they are all part of the same silent audience, a collection of witnesses to a century that has finally run out of breath. You look at the winding crank again, and for a fleeting second, you feel the urge to turn it. You imagine the rhythmic, mechanical clicking of the ratchet, the slow, steady build-up of tension in the spring, and the first, lethargic rotation of the turntable. But you realize that to play the record would be to end the dream. The beauty of the gramophone lies in its silence, in the infinite possibility of the music that remains unplayed. As long as the needle stays in its cradle, the waltz can be anything you want it to be. It can be the sound of a childhood summer, the laughter of a long-lost friend, or the quiet sigh of the wind through the eaves. The unplayed record is a vessel for every sound the attic has ever absorbed. The moonlight has moved now, casting the shadow of the great blue horn across the floorboards like a giant, dark blossom. The gramophone becomes a silhouette, a monument to the era of the mechanical and the tangible. You feel a deep, resonant peace in its company. It is a reminder that the past is not gone, it is merely recorded, held in the grooves and the springs of the world, waiting for a rhythmic encounter to bring it back to the surface. You find your own pulse slowing to match the imagined tempo of the Valse de l'Adieu, a slow, 3/4 time that governs the movement of the stars and the falling of the dust. You turn away from the gramophone, leaving the needle in its cradle and the spring in its coiled tension. You move toward the final shadows of the attic, where the stairs wait to lead you back down to the world of the present. But as you go, you carry the image of the blue morning glory horn with you, a silent, beautiful flower of metal and mahogany. You realize that you will always hear the music of this room, even when you are far away. The attic has recorded itself upon your own heart, a rhythmic spiral of memory that will continue to play long after the sun has set on this childhood afternoon. Chapter 19. The dust of the final stair, you stand at the threshold where the wooden floor of the attic meets the first downward step, and for a long moment, you do not move. Behind you lies a kingdom of silver motes and cedar-scented shadows, a vast, silent archive of everything that once mattered. Ahead of you is the narrow, dark throat of the staircase that leads back to the world of ticking clocks and moving shadows. The air here, at the edge of the descent, feels different. It is cooler, pulled upward by the draft from the floors below, carrying with it the faint, clean scent of the living house. But as you turn your head one last time, the attic reaches out to hold you, its rhythmic stillness a physical weight against your back. You look back at the room, which is now fully surrendered to the blue and violet hues of the evening. The shapes of the trunks, the rocking horse, and the gramophone have lost their sharp edges, becoming soft, indistinct islands in a sea of indigo. The round window is no longer a source of gold, it is a pale, silver eye looking out onto a world of stars. You realize that you are leaving a version of yourself here, among the pressed flowers and the old maps. Every object you touched, every scent you inhaled, has become a part of your own internal geography. The attic is not just a room in a house, it is a room in your mind, a place where the sun will always be pooling on the floorboards at exactly 4 o'clock. You take the first step down. The wood beneath your boot is different from the wide planks of the attic floor. These steps are narrow and steep, worn into smooth, shallow bowls in the center by the passage of 1,000 feet. Each step you take produces a unique, rhythmic groan from the timber, a sequential scale of sounds that marks your slow departure. It is a descending melody of age and pressure. You run your hand along the banister, a thick rail of unpolished oak that feels cool and slightly oily under your palm. It is a sturdy, reliable guide, its surface holding the microscopic history of every hand that has ever sought balance in this dark passage. As you descend, the light of the attic begins to recede above you. The rectangular opening of the trapdoor becomes a shrinking frame of silver, a high, distant ceiling of memory. You find yourself moving into a zone of absolute shadow, where your other senses sharpen to compensate for the loss of sight. You feel the change in the air pressure against your skin, the way the walls of the staircase seem to lean inward, whispering with the dry, papery breath of old wallpaper and hidden laths. Your breathing becomes a conscious, rhythmic act, a slow expansion of the lungs that echoes in the confined space. You are transition personified, a bridge between the eternal afternoon and the approaching night. Halfway down, you pause. Here, in the belly of the staircase, the silence is even deeper than it was in the attic. It is a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind that exists in the heart of a mountain. You can hear the house itself living around you. There is the rhythmic, distant ticking of a clock from the hallway below, a sharp, metallic sound that feels aggressive and hurried compared to the slow pulse of the rafters. You hear the faint, melodic creak of a floorboard in a bedroom, the sigh of the wind in the chimney, and the muffled, rhythmic thrum of the world outside. The house is a living creature, and you are currently traveling through its spine. You look back up at the sliver of light remaining at the top of the stairs. It looks like a fallen star, a tiny, brilliant fragment of the world you just left. You feel a sudden, sharp pang of loss, a desire to turn back and submerge yourself once more in the dust and the silk. But the rhythm of the descent is relentless. Gravity and time are pulling you forward, drawing you back to the reality of the present. You take another step, and then another, the wood clicking and sighing beneath you in a rhythmic countdown to the bottom. The air grows warmer as you reach the lower steps, carrying the familiar, domestic sense of the house, the smell of dinner being prepared, the faint aroma of floor wax, the presence of other people. These smells are vibrant and noisy, full of the chaotic energy of the living. They clash with the dry, scholarly scent of the attic that still clings to your clothes and your hair. You feel like a diver rising from the depths of the ocean, the pressure in your ears changing as the surface nears. Your hand reaches the end of the banister, the wood tapering off into a smooth, rounded finial that fits perfectly in your palm. You reach the final step and stand once more on the carpeted floor of the hallway. The transition is jarring. The light here is electric and yellow, casting sharp, artificial shadows that have none of the softness of the attic's glow. The walls are covered in framed photographs of people you know, people who are still alive and moving through their days. You look at your own hands, and you are surprised to see them covered in a fine, silver-grey powder, the dust of the past, a physical souvenir of your journey. You do not wipe it away. It is a mark of initiation, a dusting of starlight from the high, hidden places of the house. You turn around and look back up the dark throat of the stairs. From this perspective, the attic is invisible, hidden behind the turn of the wood and the shadow of the ceiling. It feels like a dream you had many years ago, a place that might not exist at all if you didn't have the scent of cedar in your lungs. You reach for the handle of the small, narrow door that seals the staircase away from the rest of the house. The brass is cold and heavy, the mechanism clicking into place with a rhythmic, final sound that echoes through the hallway. As the door closes, the connection is severed. The attic is once again a secret, a silent world of unplayed records and frozen rocking horses, drifting through the night in its own private orbit. You stand in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence of the closed door. You feel older, yet lighter, as if the weight of the years you encountered upstairs has somehow simplified your own life. You carry the rhythm of the afternoon with you, a slow, golden pulse that will remain steady even in the noise of the world below. You walk away from the door, your footsteps muffled by the carpet, heading toward the light and the voices of the living. But in the back of your mind, the sun is still pooling on the floorboards, the dust motes are still dancing in their silver nebula, and the round window is still watching the stars. The childhood afternoon is never truly over, it is simply waiting, tucked away beneath the rafters, for the next time you decide to climb the secret stairs and remember. Chapter 20. The secret garden of the moon, the door to the attic is closed, but your journey is far from over. Instead of heading toward the warm, yellow light of the kitchen, you find yourself drawn toward the back of the house, toward the heavy oak door that leads out into the evening. You turn the iron key, and the mechanism yields with a deep, rhythmic thud, releasing you into the cool, damp embrace of the night. You are stepping into the very landscape you observed from the round window, but now the scale has changed. The garden is no longer a miniature world in a glass frame, it is a vast, breathing entity, a sanctuary of shadows and silver light that feels just as ancient and preserved as the attic you left behind. You step onto the gravel path, and the sound is a sharp, rhythmic crunch that echoes against the stone walls of the house. The air is heavy with the scent of wet earth and night-blooming jasmine, a fragrance so thick it feels like a physical veil brushing against your face. The storm has left the garden saturated, and as you move, you hear the rhythmic dripping of water from the leaves of the great elms, a million tiny, silver hammers striking the soft mulch of the flower beds. It is the music of the earth's slow exhale, a sound that has played in this garden since the first seeds were planted in the 19th century. You walk toward the center of the lawn, where the grass is long and cool, soaking through the leather of your shoes. In the center of the garden stands an old sundial, a pillar of moss-covered stone that has lost its power to tell the time now that the sun has vanished. You run your hand over the bronze plate at the top, feeling the cold, rhythmic ridges of the Roman numerals and the sharp, silent shadowcaster that points toward a sky full of stars. This sundial is the twin of the clock in the attic. It is a machine that has reached its limit, a monument to the fact that here, in this secret garden, time is measured not by hours, but by the growth of the ivy and the slow decay of the stone. As you look up, the moon emerges from behind a silver-edged cloud, casting a brilliant, theatrical light across the garden. The trees, which seemed like dark silhouettes moments ago, are suddenly transformed into sculptures of light and shadow. You see the intricate, rhythmic patterns of the branches, the way they reach upward in a silent, wooden prayer. The leaves of the hostas, still wet from the rain, shimmer like plates of beaten silver, reflecting the moonlight back into the deep violet of the sky. You feel as though you are standing at the bottom of a vast, nocturnal ocean, where the air is as clear as water and the light is filtered through the mystery of the night. You follow the path toward the back of the garden, where a high brick wall is entirely swallowed by a tangle of ancient wisteria. The vines are as thick as a man's arm, twisting around each other in a slow, rhythmic struggle for the light. You find the small, iron gate you saw from the window, the gate that seemed to lead to a lost geography. It is rusted shut, its hinges fused into a single, unyielding mass of iron and time. You lean against it, and you can feel the vibration of the world beyond, the lane, the woods, and the distant, muffled sound of a river. But the gate remains closed, a boundary between the world of the living and the world of the secret garden. In the corner of the wall, half hidden by a weeping willow, you discover an old stone bench. It is carved from a single block of granite, its surface worn smooth by a century of rain and the weight of countless sitters. You sit down, and the cold of the stone seeps through your clothes, grounding you, pulling your consciousness deep into the roots of the garden. From here, the house looks like a great, dark ship anchored in a sea of leaves. You see the round window of the attic, high above, reflecting the moon like a silver coin. You realize that the house and the garden are two halves of the same soul, one holding the internal memories of the mind, and the other holding the external rhythms of the earth. The smell of the garden shifts again, the sweet jasmine giving way to the sharp, medicinal scent of crushed mint and the earthy, fungal aroma of the deep woods. You hear the rhythmic call of an owl from the trees beyond the wall, a long, hollow sound that seems to expand the boundaries of the night. It is a call that has been heard in this garden for 1,000 years, a sound that is as much a part of the landscape as the stones or the trees. You find yourself closing your eyes, letting the sounds and the scents wash over you, until you feel as though you are disappearing into the shadows. You imagine the people who once walked these paths in the moonlight, the young woman who picked a rose for her journal, the traveller who stood by the gate and dreamed of distant harbours, the child who chased fireflies across this very lawn. Their movements are etched into the air, a rhythmic ghost dance that continues even in their absence. You are the latest in a long line of witnesses, a temporary guest in a place that belongs to the moon and the stars. The garden does not care about your name or your history, it only cares about the way you breathe, the way your heart beats in time with the dripping of the rain. As the moon climbs higher, the shadows in the garden grow shorter and more intense. The white roses along the wall seem to glow with an inner light, their petals looking like fragments of fallen clouds. You reach out and touch a single bloom, its texture like cool, damp silk. The rose is a perfect, rhythmic construction, a spiral of beauty that mirrors the spiral of the shell and the spiral of the galaxy. It is a reminder that the same laws of geometry and grace govern everything in this world, from the highest rafter in the attic to the deepest root in the soil. You stay on the stone bench until the first hint of pre-dawn grey begins to pull at the edges of the eastern sky. The garden is transitioning once more, moving from the mystery of the night toward the clarity of the morning. But you know that the secret garden will always remain, tucked away behind its walls and its rusted gate, a place where the childhood afternoon is preserved in the silver light of the moon. You rise from the bench, your limbs feeling stiff and heavy, and begin the rhythmic walk back toward the house. Chapter 21. The library. In the pre-dawn stillness, you cross the threshold of the house and move deeper into the ground floor, toward the heavy doors of polished cherry wood that conceal the library. This room is the very marrow of silence, a place where time has not merely stopped, but has thickened into a dense, palpable concentrate. Here, the dawn arrives more slowly than in the rest of the world. The first rays of the sun, still cold and devoid of warmth, barely pierce through the tall, narrow windows draped in heavy curtains of dusty velvet. In this spectral, ghostly light, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves appear like the endless walls of an ancient canyon, carved from leather, paper, and gold leaf. The air in the library is dry and ceremonial. It smells of old glue, the vanilla scent of decaying paper, and the faint, lingering aroma of the beeswax once used to polish the shelves. It is the scent of knowledge that has remained undisturbed for years, the smell of thoughts locked between cardboard covers. You take a step forward, and the pile of the antique Persian rug swallows the sound of your movement, turning your gait into a silent glide. Here, among hundreds of book spines, you feel not just like a visitor, but like a part of a grand, frozen dialogue between centuries. Your hand brushes against the spines of the books. This contact is a rhythmic alternation of textures. Your fingers slide over coarse canvas, over calfskin as smooth as glass, and over the ribbed edges of raised bands on the spines. Some bindings are cold and hard, others are soft, almost warm, as if they still retain the heat of the hands that once held them by the fire. You stop before a shelf where books are bound in the color of the midnight sky. The gold lettering on their spines is tarnished, but in the pre-dawn light, it suddenly flares with tiny sparks, like distant constellations. You select a single, heavy volume and slowly pull it from a shelf. The book emerges with a soft, dry sigh of friction against the wood. It is heavy, substantial, full of physical presence. As you open it in the middle, the characteristic crackle of the old binding rings out, a rhythmic sound of breaking glue and unfolding quiets. From the depths of the pages, a faint cloud of book dust drifts out, dancing in the first beam of light that has just touched the table. This is the dust of past epochs, microscopic particles of history now settling upon your skin. The pages of the book have yellowed at the edges, taking on the hue of ivory or old tea. The typeface, a classic serif with thin strokes, looks remarkably sharp and black against the paper, despite the passing century. You run your finger along the lines, feeling the faint relief of the printing. In those days, letters were pressed into the paper, leaving their mark, and now you can literally feel the physical rhythm of the words. In the margins, you find notes made with a fine nib and pale ink. Exclamation points, underlinings, brief thoughts recorded by a person long gone. This anonymous reader becomes your guide, their interest becomes yours, their doubts your own. Between the pages, you find a bookmark, a dry, translucent strip of silk. It marks a chapter on the movement of the planets. Beside it lies a forgotten theatre ticket, dated November 1912. This scrap of paper, once a pass into a world of music and light, has now become a fragile artifact pressed between meditations on the infinity of the cosmos. The library is full of such accidental encounters. Here, every book is not just a text, but a time capsule, preserving the traces of fleeting human gestures. You walk toward the massive writing desk standing by the window. On it reigns a perfect, frozen order. The heavy bronze inkwell, shaped like a sleeping lion, is empty, its interior coated with a dry, blue crust of old ink. Beside it lies a paperweight of green marble and a pen in a silver setting. All these objects seem sentient in this pre-dawn hour. They wait for someone to take them up again, for the rhythmic scratch of the pen on paper to break the great silence of the room. You sit in the deep leather chair, and it receives you with a quiet, confidential creak, as if recognizing an old friend. In the window behind you, the world is finally transformed. The cold blue color is replaced by delicate pink, and then by bright, pure gold. The sunlight bursts into the library, cutting the gloom into sharp geometric zones. Now you see myriads of dust motes swirling in the pillars of light, creating an illusion of movement in the absolutely still air. The gold touches the spines of the books, and the library seems to take a deep, radiant breath. At this moment, the boundaries between the past and the present are finally erased. You realize that these books are not just dead objects, but living voices that continue to sound as long as there is someone capable of hearing them. The rhythm of this morning is slow, majestic, and solemn. It is a time for contemplation and the recognition of life's continuity. The library holds answers to questions you have not yet had time to ask. It teaches patience and silence. You close the book, and the sound of the binding hitting the table feels like a final chord in the symphony of the passing night. You rise and head for the exit, leaving behind the golden squares on the carpet and the glints on the bookshelves. But you know the library will stay within you, just as the smell of old paper stays on your fingers and the sense of eternity stays locked in a single word. You exit the room, carefully closing the door behind you. Behind it remains a world where the sun always finds the right page, and time is but a way of turning the leaves of eternity. Your journey continues, and now the light leads you further, into the parts of the house where the morning has already taken hold, filling the space with the rhythm of a new day. Chapter 22. The dining room and the dance of bone china leaving the solemn shadows of the library, you step into the hallway where the morning has finally triumphed. The light here is no longer a tentative silver or a creeping gold, it is a bold, broad flood of white brilliance that spills across the checkered marble of the floor. You move toward the large, double-winged doors of the dining room, and as they swing open, you are greeted by a space that feels like a temple dedicated to the ritual of the morning. This is the room of clarity, of polished surfaces and sharp reflections, where the heavy, atmospheric weight of the attic and the library is replaced by a bright, crystalline energy. In the center of the room stands the great dining table, a vast expanse of dark, mirror-polished mahogany that seems to stretch on forever. It is currently set for a breakfast that occurred a lifetime ago, or perhaps one that is perpetually about to begin. The light from the south-facing windows hits the table at an angle, turning the wooden surface into a dark lake of fire. You approach the head of the table, and your reflection rises to meet you in the polish, a ghost gliding through the grain of the wood. The air here is fresh, carrying the scent of lemon oil and the faint, cold metallic tang of silver. At each place setting, the bone china rests on linen placemats that are as white as fallen snow. You reach out and touch the edge of a teacup, and the sensation is one of incredible, ethereal lightness. This is not mere pottery, it is translucent art. You hold the cup up to the morning light, and you can see the shadow of your own fingers through the delicate walls of the porcelain. It is painted with a rhythmic pattern of tiny blue cornflowers and gold vines that wind around the rim in a continuous, unbroken circle. The glaze is so smooth it feels almost wet, a vitrified surface that has repelled the dust of the decades. Beside the china lies the silver. Heavy, ornate forks and spoons with handles carved into the shape of acanthus leaves. They are tarnished in the crevices, a dark patina that highlights the incredible detail of the silversmith's work, but the flat surfaces catch the sun and throw dancing reflections, sundogs, onto the ceiling. You pick up a silver teaspoon, and its weight is comforting in your palm. It carries the rhythmic chill of the metal, a density that speaks of wealth, stability, and the slow pace of Victorian mornings. You find yourself tracing the hallmark on the back of the spoon, a tiny series of stamps that record the history of the metal's birth in a workshop in London long before you were born. The center of the table is dominated by a large, cut glass bowl filled with fruit made of wax. Though artificial, the apples and grapes have been sculpted with such rhythmic precision that they seem to hold the very essence of a harvest. The sunlight passes through the heavy, leaded glass of the bowl, refracting into 1,000 tiny rainbows that scatter across the white linen. It is a kaleidoscope of light, a silent celebration of the morning. You watch the way the rainbows move as the sun climbs higher, a slow, imperceptible shift that measures the passing of time more beautifully than any mechanical clock. You move to the sideboard, a massive piece of furniture that holds the tea service and the coffee urn. The silver urn is a towering, architectural object, its surface reflecting the entire room in a distorted, panoramic curve. You see the windows, the table, and your own small figure standing in the center of the silver belly. The tap of the urn is made of bone, yellowed by time but still smooth to the touch. You imagine the rhythmic sound of tea pouring into the china cups, the rising steam, the low murmur of morning conversation, and the clink of silver against porcelain. It is a symphony of domesticity, a rhythmic habit that once anchored the day and gave it a sense of purpose. Against the far wall stands a tall, glass-fronted cabinet where the rest of the service is kept. Here, dozens of plates are stacked in perfect, rhythmic alignment, their edges creating a serrated pattern of white and gold. There are gravy boats shaped like swans, crystal decanters with heavy stoppers that look like giant diamonds, and tiny salt cellars made of blue glass and silver. Everything is organized with a meticulous, almost mathematical precision. The cabinet is a museum of the family's social history, a record of every dinner party, every holiday, and every quiet Sunday breakfast. You notice a single, stray breadcrumb on the velvet runner of the sideboard, a tiny, dry fragment of a meal that ended decades ago. It is a human touch in this room of cold glass and hard metal. It reminds you that this was not always a museum, it was a place of hunger and satisfaction, of laughter and serious talk. You feel the presence of the people who sat at this table, the way they moved their chairs, the way they held their cups, and the rhythmic flow of their lives. They are gone, but the stage is still set for them, the silver polished and the china waiting. The sun is now fully in the room, and the heat begins to rise from the dark mahogany of the table. You feel a sense of immense clarity and peace. If the attic was the room of dreams and the library was the room of thoughts, then the dining room is the room of the present moment. It is a place of light and form, where the beauty of the world is reflected in the things we use to sustain ourselves. You breathe in the lemon-scented air, feeling the rhythm of the house as it settles into the day. You leave the table and move toward the large French doors that lead out to the morning terrace. As you place your hand on the glass, you look back at the room one last time. The silver is flashing, the china is glowing, and the rainbows are dancing across the linen. It is a perfect, frozen morning, a childhood breakfast that will never end. You push the doors open, and the fresh, cool air of the garden rushes in to meet you, mixing with the scent of the silver and the mahogany. You step out into the full light of the day, the rhythm of the house behind you and the rhythm of the world before you, moving forward into the next chapter of the light. Chapter 23. The terrace and the garden of sleeping roses as you step through the French doors of the dining room. The transition is a sudden, rhythmic expansion of the world. You move from the enclosed, lemon-scented clarity of the house onto the stone terrace, where the morning air is a vast, cooling draft that smells of ozone, damp moss, and the green fire of rising sap. The terrace is paved with wide slabs of blue-grey slate, their surfaces uneven and worn, holding shallow pools of last night's rain that reflect the pale, strengthening sky like scattered fragments of a mirror. You walk to the edge of the stone balustrade, and the world opens up beneath you in a breathtaking, rhythmic descent of terraced lawns and tangled flower beds. The sunlight here is direct and unapologetic, hitting the stone with a physical weight that begins to draw the moisture from the slate in thin, dancing ribbons of steam. You place your hands on the stone railing, and the texture is a revelation, rough, ancient, and pitted by a century of frost and heat. Lichen has claimed the shaded undersides of the balusters, a dry, crusty map of sea green and silver grey that feels like stiff parchment against your fingertips. This terrace is the bridge between the human architecture of the house and the organic chaos of the garden. It is a place where the straight lines of the dining room begin to soften and blur into the curves of the earth. Below you, the rose garden is a masterpiece of dormant beauty, just beginning to wake under the persistent touch of the sun. The bushes are old, their stems thick and gnarled like the hands of a veteran, protected by a fierce, rhythmic armor of thorns that catch the morning light. On every leaf and every closed bud, the dew remains in heavy, spherical droplets, each one a miniature lens that magnifies the green veins of the plants. As the breeze moves through the garden, these droplets slide and merge, a rhythmic falling of silver beads that creates a soft, percussive music against the mulch below. It is a garden of potential, 1,000 blooms held in a state of tight, emerald tension, waiting for the heat of the noon to release their colors. In the very center of the first terrace, standing in a circular bed of crushed white stone, is the sundial you saw from the window. Now that you are standing before it, its presence is more commanding. The gnomon, the triangular blade that casts the shadow, is made of blackened bronze, its edge sharp and defiant. It casts a long, thin finger of shadow across the numbered plate, marking a time that feels irrelevant in the face of such overwhelming light. The sundial doesn't just tell the time, it anchors the garden to the movement of the heavens. You trace the Roman numerals with your finger, feeling the coldness of the metal and the rhythmic precision of the engravings. The bronze is stained with the verdigris of the years, a brilliant, chalky turquoise that looks like a spilled potion. You descend the stone steps into the garden itself, your footsteps becoming silent as you move from the slate onto the thick, sodden grass. The grass is a deep, oceanic green, and as you walk, you leave a dark, rhythmic trail of footprints in the silver frost of the dew. The air here is colder than on the terrace, trapped by the high boxwood hedges that surround the roses. These hedges are clipped into perfect, architectural walls. They scent a sharp, cat-like musk that defines the boundaries of the garden. They are the guardians of this space, keeping the wildness of the surrounding woods at bay and preserving the rhythmic order of the formal beds. As you wander deeper into the rows of roses, you find a single, early bloom that has defied the season. It is a tea rose of a pale, buttery yellow, its petals unfurling in a slow, perfect spiral. The scent is faint but piercing, a mixture of lemon, honey, and old silk. You lean in, and the warmth of your breath causes a single drop of dew to fall from the heart of the flower. This rose is a survivor, a link to the children who once played hide-and-seek among these bushes, their laughter now just a rhythmic vibration in the air. You feel a deep, rooting connection to the ground beneath your feet, a sense that you are standing on a layer of history as thick and rich as the soil itself. The garden is full of hidden details that reveal themselves only to the patient eye. You find a terracotta pot, long since cracked by the winter ice, now serving as a home for a delicate colony of ferns. You see the rhythmic pattern of a spider's web stretched between two rose canes, its threads laden with dew until it looks like a necklace of diamonds left behind by a ghost. Everything is in a state of quiet, industrious becoming. The insects are waking, the birds are beginning their rhythmic, territorial songs in the elms above, and the very earth seems to be humming with the energy of the rising sun. You reach the far end of the rose garden, where a small stone basin sits atop a pedestal, filled to the brim with rainwater. The surface is perfectly still, a dark, reflective eye looking up at the sky. You touch the water, and the ripples spread outward in a series of perfect, concentric circles, a rhythmic pulse that disturbs the reflection of the house. As the water settles, you see your own face mirrored there, framed by the green leaves and the blue sky. You look different here than you did in the attic mirror or the silver urn. Here, in the light of the garden, you look like a part of the landscape, a creature of bone and breath standing in a world of stone and leaf. The sun has now cleared the roofline of the house, and the shadows on the terrace begin to shorten. The warmth is finally reaching the floor of the garden, and the scent of the earth is becoming stronger, a deep, loamy perfume that speaks of life, death, and the endless cycle of the seasons. You feel a sense of profound belonging. This garden, with its sleeping roses and its silent sundial, is the ultimate expression of the childhood afternoon. It is a place where time is not a line, but a circle, a rhythmic return to the same golden moment year after year. You turn back toward the house, the great stone structure rising up like a cliff against the sky. The windows are all ablaze with the reflection of the sun, a row of golden lanterns signaling the start of the day. You begin the walk back up the steps, your heart light and your mind clear. You have traveled from the highest rafters to the deepest roots, and you have found the same peace in every corner. The journey through the house is a journey through yourself, a rhythmic discovery of the memories and the light that make up the architecture of your soul. Chapter 24. The threshold of the ancient woods leaving the manicured geometry of the rose garden behind, you find yourself at the very edge of the estate, where the soft, rhythmic crunch of gravel gives way to the silent, yielding carpet of the forest floor. There is no gate here, only a gradual transition where the tall boxwood hedges lose their form and merge into the wild, unkempt thickets of hawthorn and bramble. This is the boundary of the known world, the place where the house's influence finally fades and the primordial rhythm of the earth takes over. You stand at the entrance of a green cathedral, a place where the air is noticeably cooler and the light is filtered through 1,000 layers of trembling leaves. The transition is immediate and sensory. As you step onto the dark, loamy earth, the scent of the garden, the sweet roses and the sharp boxwood, is replaced by the deep, intoxicating musk of decay and rebirth. It is the smell of damp moss, of crushed pine needles, and of the ancient, fungal breath of the soil itself. The ground beneath your feet is a complex, rhythmic weave of roots and fallen leaves, a springy, living mattress that cushions every stride. You move forward, and the canopy of the great oaks and beeches closes above you, shutting out the broad, white brilliance of the morning and replacing it with a shifting, emerald twilight. In these woods, the sunlight does not fall in floods, it arrives in flecks, tiny, rhythmic pulses of gold that dance upon the bark of the trees and the surface of the ferns. These shafts of light are like needles of fire piercing the green gloom, illuminating the millions of tiny insects that drift in the air like specks of living dust. You reach out and touch the trunk of an ancient oak, a tree that was a sapling when the house was merely a sketch on a parchment. The bark is a rugged topography of deep ridges and silver valleys, a rough, rhythmic texture that feels like the hide of an elephant. It is cool and damp, holding within its fibers the moisture of 100 storms and the strength of a century of growth. The sounds of the house are gone now, replaced by the intricate, multi-layered symphony of the forest. You hear the rhythmic drumming of a woodpecker somewhere high above, a sharp, percussive vibration that echoes through the hollow pillars of the trees. There is the constant, soft rustle of the wind in the high canopy, a sound like a distant sea that never truly falls silent. Beneath it all is the micro-rhythm of the forest floor, the scurrying of a beetle through the dry leaves, the snap of a twig, the liquid, melodic whistle of a blackbird. It is a world of constant, hidden motion, a busy, industrious silence that makes the attic seem like a different planet. You follow a narrow, winding path that seems to have been made by the passage of animals rather than the feet of humans. It leads you deeper into the heart of the woods, where the ferns grow as high as your waist. These ferns are primeval, their fronds unfurling in perfect, rhythmic spirals that mimic the patterns you saw in the library journals and the seashells. They are a deep, vibrant green, their undersides dusted with spores that look like tiny grains of gold. As you brush past them, they release a sharp, clean scent, the smell of the earth before the first cities were built. The light in the forest creates a strange, distorted sense of time. Without the shadows of the sundial or the ticking of the hallway clock, you are left with only the rhythmic movement of the sun through the leaves to mark the hours. You find a small clearing where a fallen beech tree lies across the path, its massive roots exposed like a tangled wall of petrified snakes. You sit on the trunk, the wood smooth and silver where the bark has fallen away. From this vantage point, you can see the layer upon layer of history that makes up the woods. There is the fresh growth of the spring, the rotting trunks of the fallen, and the towering giants that bridge the gap between the two. You notice a small stream nearby, a thin ribbon of clear water that winds its way over a bed of mossy stones. The sound of the water is a constant, rhythmic gurgle, a liquid laughter that never changes its pace. You walk to the edge and dip your hand into the current. The water is startlingly cold, a sharp, crystalline chill that wakes your skin and clears your mind. It tastes of stone and earth, a pure, elemental flavor that has nothing to do with the polished silver and fine china of the dining room. In the reflection of the stream, you see the canopy above you, a shimmering, distorted mosaic of green and blue. The woods hold the secrets of the very first mornings, the mornings before the house existed, before the gardens were mapped, before the attic was filled with its treasures. You feel a sense of profound, rhythmic belonging that is different from the comfort of the house. Here, you are not a guest or an owner, you are a part of the biological machinery of the world. Your breath is the breath of the trees, your heartbeat is the pulse of the earth. You realize that the childhood afternoon you have been seeking is not just found in the objects of the past, but in this eternal, living present. As you sit in the green twilight, you feel the weight of the house receding. The attic, the library, and the terrace are all still there, but they feel like small islands in this vast, verdant ocean. The forest is the source of everything, the timber for the rafters, the paper for the books, the charcoal for the sketches. It is the beginning and the end of the house's story. You find a deep, rhythmic peace in this realization. Everything returns to the earth, everything is recycled by the moss and the rain into something new and beautiful. The sun is climbing higher now, and even in the depths of the woods, the warmth is beginning to penetrate the canopy. The flecks of light on the forest floor grow brighter and more frequent, turning the moss into a carpet of glowing emeralds. You rise from the silver trunk of the beech tree, feeling refreshed and renewed. You have touched the source, the ancient rhythm that underlies all of the house's memories. You begin the walk back toward the garden, but you carry the forest with you, the scent of the ferns, the chill of the stream, and the vast, green silence of the trees. You emerge from the woods back into the rose garden, and the transition is once again a shock of light and order. The house stands before you, its stone walls glowing in the midday sun, a fortress of memory in a changing world. You walk back toward the terrace, your heart beating in time with the great, unseen heartbeat of the forest, ready to enter the final chapter of your journey through the light and the shadows of the home. Chapter 25. The kitchen and the hearth of the home leaving the cool, verdant depths of the ancient woods, you retrace your steps through the rose garden, past the sundial that now casts a shorter, sharper shadow, and across the stone terrace. You enter the house not through the grand French doors of the dining room, but through a smaller, stout door of weathered oak located at the side. This is the entrance to the kitchen, the rhythmic engine of the house, the place where the raw elements of the earth are transformed into the warmth of human life. As the door closes behind you, the vast, airy silence of the garden is replaced by a dense, enveloping atmosphere of comfort and industry. The kitchen is a room of stone, wood, and iron. The floor is made of large, irregular flagstones, worn into smooth hollows by generations of rhythmic pacing, the steps of cooks, the scurrying of children, the slow shuffle of those seeking a late-night glass of water. The air here is thick and delicious, a complex tapestry of scents that have seeped into the very limewash of the walls. You smell the dry, peppery dust of flour, the sweet, heavy scent of curing ham, and the sharp, clean aroma of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. But dominating it all is the deep, comforting perfume of wood smoke and baked bread, a scent that speaks of safety and the end of hunger. In the center of the room stands a massive work table, its top a single, thick slab of scrubbed pine. It is a landscape of scars and indentations, a record of every loaf of bread kneaded and every vegetable chopped over 100 years. You run your hand over the wood, and it feels soft, almost like velvet, from a century of being cleaned with sand and water. You find a deep circular mark where a heavy iron pot once sat, and long, rhythmic grooves where a knife once moved back and forth. This table is the altar of the domestic world, the place where the hands of the past performed their daily, life-giving rituals. Against the far wall stands the range, a magnificent beast of black cast iron, its polished brass knobs gleaming like small suns in the shadows. Even now, it radiates a gentle, rhythmic warmth, a lingering heartbeat of heat that never truly leaves the stone of the house. You place your hand near the iron surface, and you can feel the air shimmering. This is the hearth, the sacred center of the home. Above it, a row of copper pots hangs from a rack, their bottoms blackened by soot but their sides glowing with a deep, orange fire. They hang in perfect, rhythmic graduation, from tiny saucepans to great, heavy stockpots, like a set of metallic bells waiting to be struck. You move to the pantry, a small, cool room off the main kitchen that smells of vinegar, spices, and cold stone. Here, the walls are lined with shelves holding jars of preserved fruits, plums, pears, and cherries trapped in heavy syrup, their colors still vibrant behind the thick, wavy glass. There are crocks of salt and bins of grain, a rhythmic storage of the harvest that ensures the house will survive the winter. The temperature here is lower, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the range, and the silence is deeper, as if the food itself is sleeping, waiting to be called into the light of the kitchen. On the counter sits a large, earthenware mixing bowl, its interior a smooth, creamy white. Beside it lies a wooden rolling pin, carved from a single piece of maple, its handles worn thin by the grip of countless hands. You pick it up, and the weight is perfectly balanced, a tool designed for a specific, rhythmic motion. You can almost see the clouds of white flour rising into the air, the rhythmic thump-thump of the dough being worked, and the focused, meditative silence of a morning spent in preparation. These objects are not just tools, they are the instruments of a domestic symphony that has played in this room for generations. The light in the kitchen is different from the light in the rest of the house. It comes through small, deep-set windows, falling in thick, dusty shafts that illuminate the swirling steam from a kettle or the dancing particles of flour in the air. It is a practical light, a light that focuses on the work at hand. You watch the way a single beam hits a stack of white ceramic plates, turning them into a column of brilliant, rhythmic arcs. Everything in this room has a purpose, a place, and a rhythm. There is no waste here, only the constant, beautiful cycle of preparation and consumption. You find a small wooden chair tucked into a corner by the hearth, its seat woven from rushes. You sit down, and the warmth of the range wraps around you like a heavy woolen blanket. From this vantage point, the kitchen feels like a fortress within a fortress. The thick stone walls and the heavy timbered ceiling provide a sense of absolute security. You realize that this is where the childhood afternoon truly lives, not in the grand gestures of the library or the quiet dreams of the attic, but here, in the rhythmic warmth of the kitchen, in the promise of a meal and the safety of the fire. The sounds of the kitchen are subtle but persistent. The rhythmic tark of a wall clock, the soft hiss of the fire, the distant, muffled sound of the wind in the chimney. It is the sound of a house at rest, a house that is full and satisfied. You find yourself drifting into a state of deep, sensory peace, your mind filled with the smells and the warmth of the room. You are at the heart of the world, in the place where life is sustained and memories are nourished. As you rise to leave, your hands still carrying the faint scent of flour and wood smoke, you look back at the big pine table and the black iron range. They stand there in the golden, dusty light, silent witnesses to the endurance of the home. You move toward the main hallway, the transition back to the rest of the house feeling like a move from the heart to the limbs. The kitchen remains behind you, a warm, glowing ember in the center of the stone, a place where the fire never truly goes out and the rhythm of the meal never truly ends. Chapter 26. The music room and the silent resonance leaving the savory, hearth-warmed air of the kitchen, you move through the central spine of the house toward the west wing. Here, behind doors of heavy, pale oak, lies the music room. As you cross the threshold, the atmosphere shifts instantly. It is as if you have stepped inside the body of a great, hollow instrument. The air is thinner here, vibrating with a high, clear frequency that smells of lemon-scented oil, aged spruce, and the dry, metallic tang of copper strings. The afternoon sun, now beginning its slow, rhythmic descent toward the horizon, pours through the tall windows in broad, golden planks, igniting the polished wood of the instruments until they glow like embers. The center of this sanctuary is occupied by a grand piano, a magnificent curve of black lacquered with it rests on 3 heavy, fluted legs. It stands like a dark, silent continent in the middle of the room, its surface so perfectly polished that it reflects the white clouds drifting past the windows. You approach it with a sense of quiet awe, your footsteps making a soft, rhythmic thud on the parquet floor. You reach out and lift the fallboard, revealing the long, ivory and ebony smile of the keyboard. The keys are slightly yellowed, holding the subtle indentations of 1,000 performances, a physical record of fingers moving in rhythmic patterns across the scales. You do not play a note. Instead, you gently lay your palm across the low strings inside the open lid. They are cold and tense, a forest of copper and steel wires held under immense pressure. Even without being struck, they hum with a sympathetic resonance, a ghostly vibration that you feel in the bones of your hand. This piano is a vessel of captured sound, holding within its wooden frame every melody that has ever filled this room. You imagine the rhythmic sway of a pianist's body, the quick, percussive strike of the hammers, and the way the music once spilled out of these windows to mingle with the scent of the roses on the terrace. In the corner of the room, resting in a stand of dark mahogany, is a cello. Its body is a beautiful, rhythmic sculpture of flame maple and spruce, carved into a shape that mimics the curves of the human form. The wood is a deep, honey gold, glowing with a warmth that seems to come from within. The bow rests across the strings, its horsehair white and translucent in the sun. You look at the F-holes, those elegant, flowing apertures carved into the face of the instrument. They are like portals into a dark, resonant void. You can almost hear the deep, woody growl of the bass notes, a sound so low and rhythmic that it vibrates in the floorboards beneath your feet. The music room is a place of absolute, expectant silence. It is the silence of a breath held before a song, a pause that is as meaningful as the music itself. Scattered across a small walnut table are sheets of music, the paper brittle and the edges curled like dried leaves. The notation is a rhythmic dance of black ink, minims, crotchets, and quavers marching across the staves in a complex, silent geometry. You see the handwritten instructions in the margins. Adagio, con espressione, lento. These are the blueprints for emotion, the instructions for turning the stillness of the room into a living, breathing tapestry of sound. The sunlight has now reached the far wall, where a collection of smaller instruments is displayed. There is a silver flute, its keys looking like a row of frozen water droplets, and a mandolin with a back like a striped gourd, its strings as thin as spider silk. Each instrument is a masterpiece of balance and tension, a physical manifestation of the human desire to capture the rhythm of the universe. You feel the presence of the musicians who once gathered here, the rhythmic tuning of the strings, the shared nod of the heads, and the sudden, explosive unity of a string quartet beginning a new movement. Against the windows, a row of high-backed chairs with velvet cushions stands ready for an audience. The velvet is a deep, moss green, holding the faint, rhythmic indentations of those who sat and listened while the shadows lengthened across the floor. To sit in this room is to become a part of its resonance. You realize that the music room is the emotional heart of the house, a place where the logic of the library and the industry of the kitchen are transformed into pure, rhythmic feeling. It is a room that exists for the sake of beauty alone. You find a small metronome resting on the mantel of the fireplace. It is a pyramid of dark wood with a silver pendulum. You touch the weight, and for a brief second, the pendulum swings. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound is a sharp, rhythmic heartbeat that cuts through the stillness, measuring out the seconds with an indifferent, mechanical precision. It is the same rhythm that governs the tides, the growth of the trees, and the turning of the stars. After a few beats, the pendulum slows and stops, returning the room to its profound, expectant silence. The sun is sinking lower now, and the light in the room is turning to a deep, resonant orange. The shadows of the instruments are long and elegant, stretching across the floor like the fingers of a shadow orchestra. You feel a sense of completion, as if the silence of the room has finally answered a question you didn't know you were asking. The music of the house is not something you hear with your ears, it is something you feel in the rhythm of your own breathing, in the quiet pulse of your blood, and in the stillness of your soul. You move toward the exit, your hand lingering for a final moment on the smooth, cold curve of the piano's lid. The music room remains behind you, a dark and golden sanctuary of resonance. The instruments stay in their places, their strings tense and their bodies glowing, waiting for the next time the light hits them just right and the next hand to wake the music from its long, rhythmic sleep. You move out into the hallway, the echoes of the silent waltz following you as you head toward the final destination of your journey through the afternoon. Chapter 27. The master bedroom and the final sanctuary of light leaving the resonant silence of the music room. You ascend the main staircase once more, but this time you stop at the heavy, carpeted landing of the second floor. You are at the door of the master bedroom, the ultimate sanctuary of the house, the place where the day's rhythm finally surrenders to the deep, velvet embrace of rest. As you push the door open, the light greets you in a way that is entirely different from the rest of the house. The sun is now a glowing, crimson orb hovering just above the horizon, and it floods this room with a thick, syrupy light the color of ancient honey and burnt amber. It is a light that doesn't just illuminate, it envelops, softening the edges of reality and turning the room into a golden dream. The air here is cool and profoundly still, carrying a scent that is both delicate and eternal. It is the fragrance of dried lavender sachets tucked into linen drawers, the faint, powdery scent of iris root, and the clean, rhythmic aroma of sun-bleached cotton. This is the scent of peace, a sanctuary where the noise of the world is muffled by heavy drapes and thick, woolen rugs. You move toward the center of the room, your footsteps vanishing into the deep, cream-colored pile of the carpet, and you find yourself standing before the great four-poster bed. The bed is a magnificent structure of dark, hand-carved walnut, its posts rising like the trunks of a sacred grove toward a canopy of pale silk. The linens are piled high, a rhythmic landscape of white-on-white embroidery, quilts of heavy down, and pillows that still hold the faint, ghostly indentations of a head at rest. You reach out and touch the edge of the duvet, and the fabric is cool and crisp, a testament to a time when domestic comfort was an art form. This bed is the center of the house's most private history, a place of birth, of dreaming, and of the long, rhythmic breathing of sleep that has sustained the family for generations. Beside the bed stands a small nightstand of bird's-eye maple, its surface holding a single crystal carafe of water and a silver-framed photograph. The photograph is faded to a warm sepia, showing a young couple standing on the very terrace you just left, their faces bright with a hope that the house is carefully preserved. The silver of the frame is tarnished to a deep, charcoal grey, but the glass is clear, reflecting the orange fire of the sunset. This small object is an anchor of identity, a rhythmic reminder of the love and the continuity that built these walls and filled these rooms with light. You move toward the large dressing table that sits between the two western windows. It is a feminine space, delicate and refined, covered in a silk runner and a collection of crystal bottles. The bottles have heavy, multifaceted stoppers that catch the dying sun, refracting the light into a rhythmic display of amber and gold across the walls. You pick up a silver-backed hairbrush, its bristles soft and white, and you can feel the rhythmic history of the woman who once sat here every evening, brushing her hair in front of the triptych mirror as the shadows lengthened. The mirror itself is tilted, reflecting not your face, but the golden expanse of the bed and the far corner of the room, creating a feeling of infinite, nested spaces. The sunlight is now at its most intense, a horizontal fire that reaches the very back of the room. It illuminates the heavy, velvet curtains, turning the dark blue fabric into a glowing, translucent purple. You watch the dust motes one last time here, in the master bedroom. Their dance is slower, more deliberate, as if they too are settling down for the night. They move in a rhythmic, undulating wave, a microscopic galaxy spinning in the final warmth of the day. You realize that this room is the true end of the childhood afternoon. It is the place where all the memories you have gathered, the shells from the attic, the books from the library, the music from the piano, come to rest and are woven into the fabric of dreams. Against the far wall stands a large, winged armchair upholstered in a faded floral damask. You sit down, and the chair's high back curls around you like a protective shell. From this vantage point, you watch the sun finally touch the horizon. The sky outside the windows is a riot of violet, rose, and deep gold, a rhythmic symphony of color that signals the end of the day's performance. The room begins to dim, the orange light receding from the carpet and climbing the walls, leaving the floor in a soft, lavender twilight. You feel a sense of profound, rhythmic completion. You have traveled through the entire anatomy of the house, and you have found the same soul in every room. The silence of the bedroom is not empty, it is full of the echoes of the day. You hear the rhythmic settling of the house, the timber cooling, the stone breathing, the last of the birds falling silent in the garden below. Your own breathing has slowed to match the rhythm of the room, a deep, steady swell of peace that fills your chest. You are no longer a visitor, you are a part of the house's eternal present. The childhood afternoon is not a time that passed, it is a place that exists forever, tucked away in the light on a silver frame or the scent of lavender in a drawer. The sun disappears below the line of the woods, and the first star of evening appears in the window, exactly as it did in the attic. The transition is complete. The golden afternoon has turned into the silver night. You rise from the armchair, your movements slow and reverent. You move toward the door, leaving the room to its shadows and its dreams. You know that when you close this door, the house will continue its rhythmic existence in the dark, the objects you touched remaining in their places, holding their secrets until the sun rises to find them again. You walk down the stairs, through the silent hallway, and back to the front door. As you step out into the cool, night air, you carry the house within you. You are the vessel for its light and its shadows. The rhythmic heartbeat of the childhood afternoon is now your own heartbeat. You walk away into the world, but you never truly leave. The house remains behind you, a glowing monument of memory in the dark, a place where the sun is always pooling on the floorboards, and the waltz is always about to begin, and the peace is forever, and ever, and ever. Chapter 28. The forgotten mill and the song of the water as you leave the shadow of the house and the heavy perfume of the master bedroom. Your path leads you back toward the whisper of the trees. The moonlight is now high and silver, turning the world into a landscape of charcoal and mercury. You find the narrow trail that skirts the edge of the woods, where the air is thick with the scent of damp moss and the cold, metallic breath of running water. You are following the stream, that rhythmic ribbon of liquid glass you touched in the forest, but here, as the terrain begins to slope downward, the water gains a new, urgent energy. The quiet gurgle has become a persistent, low-frequency hum that vibrates in the soles of your boots. You walk deeper into the valley, where the trees grow taller and the canopy denser, until the woods suddenly open into a small, hidden glade. Standing there, draped in a thick cloak of ivy and silver mist, is the old watermill. It is a structure of rough-hewn stone and massive, blackened timbers, appearing more like a natural outcropping of the earth than something built by human hands. The mill has stood here for centuries, a silent partner to the stream, its existence governed entirely by the rhythmic flow of the seasons and the weight of the water. You approach the building, and the scent of the house is replaced by the smell of ancient, waterlogged oak, wet stone, and the sharp, clean fragrance of wild mint. The most striking feature of the mill is the great wooden wheel, half submerged in the rushing current of the mill race. It is a monumental circle of dark timber, its paddles worn thin and jagged by 100 years of friction. Even now, in its state of abandoned grace, the wheel holds a phantom motion. The water surges against the lower blades, creating a constant, rhythmic splashing that sounds like the applause of a distant crowd. You reach out and touch the part of the wheel that rises above the water. The wood is cold and slick, covered in a velvet skin of green moss that feels like wet fur. It is a living artifact, a bridge between the kinetic energy of the stream and the mechanical stillness of the building. You find a low door of splintered pine, its iron hinges rusted into a permanent, open grin. As you step inside, you are enveloped by a darkness so profound it feels physical. The air is heavy and damp, smelling of pulverized grain, damp earth, and the oily residue of the old machinery. As your eyes adjust to the moonlight filtering through the gaps in the roof, the internal skeleton of the mill begins to reveal itself. Massive wooden gears, some as large as the wheels of a carriage, are interlocked in a complex, silent geometry. Their teeth are made of hard hornbeam, polished to a dull shine by decades of rhythmic grinding. In the center of the floor lie the millstones, two massive discs of granite, their surfaces etched with a series of radiating grooves known as furrows. These stones are the lungs of the mill. You run your hand over the top stone, feeling the incredible, cold weight of the granite. It is rough and honest, holding within its pores the ghostly dust of 1,000,000 bushels of wheat. You can almost feel the rhythmic vibration of the stones as they once turned, the heat of the friction, and the sweet, nutty smell of the fresh flour as it spilled into the bins. The mill was a place of transformation, a rhythmic forge where the gold of the fields was turned into the white bread of the kitchen. You climb a set of narrow, skeletal stairs to the upper loft. The wood beneath your feet is thin and trembling. reacting to the constant surge of the water outside. From here, you can see the intricate system of chutes and hoppers that once directed the grain into the heart of the machine. Everything is covered in a fine, ghostly powder, the literal dust of time. It has settled on the rafters, the gears, and the abandoned sacks that lie slumped in the corners like sleeping giants. You find a small window, its glass long since gone, and you look out at the stream. From this vantage point, you see the water as a living, rhythmic pulse, a force that gives the mill its purpose and its life. The silence of the mill is different from the silence of the house. It is not a silence of rest, but a silence of waiting. The machinery is poised, its gears interlocked and its stones ready, as if it is merely holding its breath for the next harvest. You find an old wooden stool near the window and sit down. The rhythmic roar of the water outside fills the space, a white noise that drowns out the internal dialogue of the mind. You feel the immense, heavy peace of the machine. The mill is a reminder of a time when the rhythm of human life was perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of the planet. There was no hurry here, there was only the steady, inevitable turning of the wheel. You notice a small, hand-carved wooden bowl resting on a ledge, containing a few shriveled grains of corn. You pick one up and roll it between your fingers. It is hard and dry, a tiny nugget of potential life that has outlasted the millers who once labored here. It is a link to the fields, to the sun, and to the rhythmic cycle of planting and reaping. You place the grain back in the bowl, a small gesture of respect for the work that was done in this dark, damp sanctuary. The moonlight shifts, illuminating a stack of old ledger books on a desk near the gears. You open the top one, and the pages are damp and swollen, the ink blurred into abstract, rhythmic patterns of blue and black. You can see the long columns of figures, the names of local farmers, and the dates of the grinds. It is a record of a community's survival, a paper history of the bread that fed the house and the village beyond. The ledger smells of mold and ink, a scent that marks the end of the mill story. As you sit in the darkness, you feel the vibration of the water wheel through the floorboards. It is a deep, subsonic thrum that resonates in your chest. It is the heartbeat of the valley. You realize that the mill is the bridge between the wild forest and the cultivated garden. It is the place where nature was harnessed by human ingenuity, not to be conquered, but to be partnered with. The childhood afternoon you have been following has led you here, to the source of the house's sustenance, to the rhythmic foundation of its very existence. You rise from the stool and descend the trembling stairs, your hands brushing against the cold, iron-hard wood of the gears. You step out of the mill and back into the silver night. The air is fresh and cold, the roar of the water suddenly louder now that you are standing beside the wheel. You look back at the dark, stone silhouette of the building. It stands as a silent monument to the power of the stream and the endurance of the land. You turn and follow the path back toward the woods, the rhythmic splashing of the wheel echoing in your mind as you head toward the final, moonlit stretch of your long journey home. Chapter 29. The hidden lake and the keeper of the boathouse leaving the heavy, percussive vibration of the old mill behind. You follow the stream as it carves a deeper, more winding path through the limestone heart of the valley. The water here is no longer a rushing torrent, it begins to slow and broaden, its rhythmic pulse softening into a long, sustained glide. The trees draw back, their roots yielding to the soft, silty soil of the wetlands, and suddenly, the forest opens to reveal a hidden lake. It is a vast, circular mirror of dark water, perfectly still beneath the silver eye of the moon. The surface is so polished that the stars seem to be drowning in its depths, creating a dual universe of light above and below. At the far edge of the lake, where the reeds grow in thick, rhythmic clusters, stands a derelict boathouse. It is a long, low structure built of weathered cedar that has turned a ghostly, shimmering silver under the moonlight. The roof, covered in a velvet skin of moss and fallen pine needles, slopes down toward the water's edge like a tired brow. This is the final outpost of the childhood afternoon, a place of departures and returns, where the memories of the land meet the deep, silent mystery of the water. You walk along the muddy bank, your footsteps producing a rhythmic, hollow squelch, until you reach the wooden pier that leads to the boathouse door. The pier is a skeleton of grey timber, the planks spaced apart to reveal the dark, rhythmic lap of the water against the pilings below. Each step you take is a deliberate act of balance, the wood groaning with a deep, structural resonance that echoes across the silent lake. You reach the door, a heavy, sagging portal of barn red that has faded to the colour of a dried rose. It hangs on a single iron hinge, and as you push it open, the interior of the boathouse reveals itself in a series of sharp, rhythmic shadows. The air inside is cold and intensely atmospheric, smelling of wet wood, stagnant water, old hemp rope, and the faint, sweet scent of evaporating varnish. The center of the room is occupied by a single, narrow rowing boat, suspended from the rafters by thick, frayed ropes. It is a work of rhythmic elegance, it hull-crafted from overlapping planks of mahogany that gleam with the ghost of 1,000 polishings. The boat hangs just a few inches above the black water that fills the central slip of the boathouse. You reach out and touch the side of the vessel, feeling the cold, smooth curve of the wood. It feels like the skin of a dormant creature, a vessel of memory that has carried generations of children across the surface of the lake. The oars are tucked neatly inside, their blades worn thin by the rhythmic friction of the water, their handles dark and polished by the grip of forgotten hands. In the corner of the boathouse, you find a small workbench covered in the tools of a long-lost trade. There are cans of solidified paint, brushes with bristles as stiff as bone, and coils of rope that have become stiff and salty with age. Beside the bench sits an old wicker picnic basket, its lid half open to reveal the remnants of a summer afternoon, a linen napkin, a rusted tin for biscuits, and a glass bottle that once held lemonade. This basket is a time capsule of a specific moment of joy, a rhythmic pause in the life of the house when the only thing that mattered was the temperature of the water and the color of the sky. You move to the very end of the pier, where the boathouse opens onto the lake. The view is a masterpiece of nocturnal symmetry. The moon is reflected perfectly in the center of the water, creating a path of shivering silver light that seems to lead toward the horizon. You sit on the edge of the pier, your legs dangling over the dark water. You feel the rhythmic sway of the building as it reacts to the subtle movements of the lake. It is a slow, hypnotic rocking that lulls the mind into a state of deep, meditative calm. The water below you is a living thing, a dark, silent witness to everything the house and the garden have ever been. You notice a series of small, rhythmic ripples moving toward you from the center of the lake. For a moment, you imagine a creature of the deep, but as the ripples reach the boathouse, you see they are caused by a pair of swans, moving like white ghosts through the shadows. They glide with an effortless, rhythmic grace, their necks curved into elegant question marks. They represent the absolute peace of the hidden lake, a life that is governed entirely by the moon and the water. They move past the boathouse without a sound, leaving only a fading trail of silver in their wake. Inside the boathouse, hanging on a peg by the door, is an old oil lantern. You lift it down, and the glass is thick with the dust of decades. You rub a small circle clean with your thumb, and the interior of the lamp reveals a wick that is still charred from its last use. You can almost see the flame flickering in the drafty room, casting rhythmic shadows against the mahogany hull of the boat. This lamp was the signal for the end of the day, the light that called the rowers back to the shore as the sun began to set behind the elms. It is a symbol of homecoming, a rhythmic return to the safety of the land. You feel the immense weight of the stillness here. The boathouse is the place where the house finally lets go of its secrets. Everything here is open to the elements, to the water, and to the sky. It is a place of transition, where the solid world of stone and timber begins to dissolve into the fluid world of the lake. You realize that your journey through the childhood afternoon has reached its logical conclusion. You have followed the light from the highest attic to the deepest water, and you have found the same rhythmic truth in every step. The past is not a destination, it is a current that flows through everything, a constant, underlying pulse that sustains the present. The moon begins to sink lower, and the silver light on the lake turns to a deep, resonant charcoal. You rise from the edge of the pier, your body feeling heavy and slow as if you have absorbed the weight of the water. You take one last look at the rowing boat, its dark hull suspended in the shadows like a sleeping bird. You turn and walk back through the boathouse, past the workbench and the picnic basket, and out onto the muddy bank. The door swings shut behind you with a final, rhythmic thud that echoes across the silent water. You begin the walk back toward the house, following the stream in reverse. The roar of the mill and the silence of the library wait for you in the distance, but for now, you carry the peace of the hidden lake within you. The rhythm of the water has become the rhythm of your own soul. You are a part of the house, a part of the woods, and a part of the lake. The journey is over, but the light of the childhood afternoon remains, a golden, rhythmic presence that will never truly fade as long as the moon rises over the water and the house stands in the silence of the elms. Epilogue. The tapestry of the eternal afternoon, you stand at the edge of the woods, where the wild grass meets the beginning of the home's manicured lawn. The moon is beginning to pale, and the first pre-dawn light is weaving a thin, silver thread along the horizon. From this vantage point, the house stands as a singular, magnificent monument to time, a vessel of stone and memory that has held your spirit through every room, every shadow, and every rhythmic heartbeat of the day. You look at the dark silhouette of the structure, and for the first time, you see it not as a collection of separate chambers, but as a living, breathing entity, a grand tapestry where every thread is a moment of your life. The journey began in the high, dusty sanctuary of the attic, where the rocking horse moved in its silent, eternal gallop and the seashells whispered of ancient tides. That room was the mind of the house, a reservoir of dreams and forgotten treasures, where the air was thick with the scent of cedar and the weight of the years. You remember the round window, that circular eye that transformed the garden into a watercolor of gold and green. It was there that you first felt the rhythmic pull of the past, a connection to the child who once stood in that same light, watching the same dust motes dance in their silver nebula. From the attic, you descended through the spine of the house, passing through the library where the voices of 1,000 authors remained locked in their leather-bound cages. You recall the dry, scholarly scent of the paper and the rhythmic scratch of the imagined pen. It was a place of intellectual stillness, where the logic of the world was recorded in neat, ink-stained rows. Then came the dining room, the chamber of crystalline clarity, where the sun played a rhythmic symphony across the silver and the bone china. It was a room of presence and ritual, a celebration of the tangible world and the simple, profound beauty of a shared meal. You remember the kitchen, the warm, beating heart of the home, where the smell of wood smoke and baked bread offered a sensory embrace that transcended time. It was the hearth of the world, a place of transformation and sustenance. And then, the music room, where the silence was so heavy with potential that the very air seemed to hum with a phantom waltz. The grand piano and the silent cello stood as monuments to emotion, their strings waiting for a touch to turn the stillness into a rhythmic tapestry of sound. Each room was a chapter, each object a word, in the long, unfolding story of the childhood afternoon. The journey led you beyond the walls, out onto the terrace where the stone held the heat of the sun, and down into the rose garden where the dew fell in silver beads. You followed the stream to the old mill, feeling the rhythmic thrum of the great wooden wheel, a mechanical heartbeat that echoed the pulse of the valley. And finally, the hidden lake and the boathouse, where the solid world dissolved into the fluid mystery of the water. You have seen the house from the inside out and the outside in, and you have found that there is no boundary between the two. The house is a part of the landscape, and the landscape is a part of the house. Now, as the dawn begins to break, you feel a sense of immense, rhythmic peace. The childhood afternoon is no longer something you are chasing, it is something you inhabit. It is the texture of the weathered oak, the smell of the lavender in the linen drawer, the coldness of the stream, and the warmth of the range. It is the way the light hits the floorboards at a certain hour and the way the shadows stretch across the grass. You realize that you carry the entire architecture of this house within you. The rooms are your memories, the hallways are your thoughts, and the windows are your eyes. The house is a protector of the soul. It has stood through the seasons and the centuries, a constant, unyielding presence in a world of change. It has watched the children grow and the elders fade, and it has held the essence of each life within its walls. You look up at the master bedroom window, where the first light of the new day is just beginning to catch the glass. It is a signal of continuity, a promise that the rhythm will begin again. The fire will be lit in the kitchen, the books will be opened in the library, and the music will wait in the shadows of the piano. You find yourself walking toward the front door one last time. This is not a departure, but a return to a different kind of presence. You have integrated the past into your present, the dream into your reality. As you reach the handle, you feel the cold, familiar weight of the metal. You turn it, and the door opens with a soft, welcoming click. The hallway is filled with the grey, ethereal light of the morning, a clean slate upon which the new day will be written. You step inside and close the door, the sound of final, rhythmic period at the end of a long and beautiful sentence. You are home. Not just in the sense of a physical location, but in the sense of a spiritual destination. You have navigated the geography of your own heart, using the house as your map. The silence that greets you is no longer empty, it is a full, resonant silence, packed with the richness of everything you have encountered. The childhood afternoon is eternal. It exists in the space between the ticks of the clock, in the golden pool of light on the rug, and in the quiet, rhythmic breathing of a house at rest. You walk toward the stairs, your movements light and certain. You are a part of the history of this place, a thread in the tapestry, a note in the song. As the sun rises over the elms and the first bird begins its territorial call, you realize that the journey never truly ends. It only transforms, a constant, rhythmic cycle of memory and light that will continue as long as the house stands and there is a heart to remember it. The light is here. The day is new. The house is waiting. And you are, at last, exactly where you are meant to be.